disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from my house and in Los Angeles and from several other places around the country this morning. We're so thrilled to be here with you on this Monday morning. Boy, the ex-school teacher in me loves a good Monday morning. It's a fresh start. It's a new day. It's an opportunity to look at something and change something or do something new because it's a fresh start on a Monday. So we're thrilled to be here with you on this Fresh Start Monday. And we've got a big show for you. We've got a lot going on. We've got a wonderful expert and a wonderful guest that's going to be here. We want to remind you that this show is meant to be interactive. We want to know your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, and your concerns. We recently changed our format, and we appreciate you being patient with us while we work out some bugs. We are now coming to you in a different way, and it means that I can see that Michelle just said hi that quickly. So I don't know how long that took, Michelle, but it just popped up on my screen. So we think it's a shorter period of time, and we like to be more responsive because that's the whole reason for doing a live show, right? So we want to talk a little bit about how you can connect with us if you're watching the live show. We're here with you, as I said, for the next hour live. If you're watching us live, you're probably watching us in one of a few different places, right? You might be watching us on our homepage, which Traven has put on the screen in front of you. Autism. Hi, Jenny. Autism Live, it's autism-live.com. That's our homepage. You can watch all of our videos there. You can watch us live there. You can post questions there. I will tell you that it is no longer the fastest way to get your question answered. It used to be the thing. This is faster. So we encourage you to watch and leave live questions in the other 4 places that we are live, which is YouTube and also on Facebook Live. We are also live on Periscope and Twitter. So we're live on all of those places. If you're watching us in any of those places, we encourage you to use the tools that they provide to like us, follow us, write a review, on and on and on. Hi, Ivani. I'm doing well this morning. How are you? Thrilled that you guys are here with us. Now, if you want to watch us recorded or you're like, hey, I just found you and I kind of like this show and I like how you can ask questions and I'm wondering who you've had on before, what else have you covered? Because we have been on the air now for, I believe, so we're well over 9 years. I don't know where we are in terms of being at the 10-year mark, but we're well over 9 years. So there's that many videos to look at, right? So if you want to watch us recorded, there are very specific places that you can watch both the show that we're doing today and the stuff that we've done in the past. So let's talk a little bit about that. By the way, you can go through all of our archives on YouTube and on our homepage. Those are all, and you can search by topic. It's so good. So, but take a look at the stuff there in the right-hand column because those are all the places that we podcast to. We are a free download on iTunes. And by the way, you can choose, do you want audio? Hi, Julia. Do you want audio only? Or do you want to have sound and picture? Because you get to choose on iTunes. And it is a free download. Subscribe to us. Leave a review. We would love that. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Ghana. Hello, Ghana. And now newly on Amazon Music, which everybody needs to check out. That's a brand new platform. I know for the whole last month I was teasing that we were coming to some new places. And that's kind of what I was talking about. We are also available on Audible and Deezer, and that's just the beginning of the list. We are available as a podcast. Hello, Julia. In many, many places. Now, our criteria is that we like to be free wherever we are. So if you can think of a place that has podcasts and you have not seen us there, and it is a place that makes podcasts available for free, let us know. We'd be happy to search that out and Traven is so good. He sets that up, and we're clapping back to Julia. Okay, you guys. I want to mention at the start of the show, it's something that I always like to mention to you guys, that we have a lot of experts that come on the show. I'm not one of them. My credential to be here is that I'm a very grateful, wonderful, proud, well, I'm not wonderful, but I'm proud of the wonderful son that I have that was diagnosed with autism. Good morning, Jacinda. Thrilled to have you here. My son was diagnosed at 2.5. Excuse me, and he's doing great. I was a little late getting started this morning because we were deciding by tonight at midnight he has to narrow down which colleges he's going to and who he will go, who, if anyone, that he will do early decision. It's that time. Pinch me, somebody, but not too hard. I bruise easily. So I'm so grateful. But this does not make me an expert in the field of autism. Let's be really clear about that. Yes, I have been hosting shows about autism now for, 13 years and interviewed a lot of people. I'd like to say that I have an informed opinion, but not an expert. So please don't confuse me with the experts that we have here on the show. Please confuse me with somebody that cares deeply about your journey. And I say you because we welcome here on the show the larger autism community. So that starts with individuals who are on the autism spectrum. We want to serve those individuals. And we also want to help everyone who loves those individuals so that they can be of better support and find more resources and more information. And that's what we're about here. Information and inspiration. That's the purpose we would like to serve here for Autism Live. We want to help all of those members of the autism community so that they do not feel like they are alone. No one is alone. We are all different. That is absolutely true, but no one is alone. And together we have a very large, large voice. So, but don't confuse me with an expert, confuse me with somebody who wants to help that large autism community, which starts with individuals on the spectrum. I want to be clear about that. Okay, so we also want you to know that on Mondays, we like to start off the week with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani nani are the experts talking about? What does this have to do with us? And why should we bother to learn this term? I'm seeing somebody wrote in, I have 2 girls, one is autistic and the other little girl can't switch off before bed. And the school said we would do a referral originally, and now they have changed their mind. Ooh, well, Bonnie's going to be here in a little while. Let's bring that up to her. If you would do me a favor and write in what it is that the school said they would offer and what's going on right now. Go ahead and write that into us. But anyway, jargon of the day. So Traven, what is our jargon today? Ooh, expressive language. It's an oldie but a goodie. We like that. We're back to school. in some ways, we're back to school, and in interesting ways, right? It's like that Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. We are living in some interesting times, y'all. Right? So you'll hear this term used a lot in school setting, and I'm going to be willing to guess that on Thursday, our other jargon of the day will be receptive language. So let's talk a little bit about expressive language, because this is sometimes a large area of concern for individuals who are on the autism spectrum. We're going to give you first the actual definition that the experts give you, and I'm going to see if there's anything to be made fun of. Expressive language, the production of language, including speech, signing, and or gestures for communication. All right, it isn't one that we can make that much fun of, right? Which is good. We don't want to have to make fun of definitions because they're so inscrutable, right? So I love here, though, the reminder to us that it is language that includes speech, signing, and or gestures for communication. What we really need to think of, and let's go on to our working definition so that we can get all clear about this. This is the child or the individual, anyone's ability to communicate their needs. And I always try to think of it as arrows going in and going out. So anything that I have from me going out that's communication, that's expressive. It does not necessarily have to be vocal. I know we all get concerned about the vocal speech thing, right? And we all want vocal speech for ourselves and for our kiddos. Listen, I had a terrible bout with nodes on my vocal cords. And, I used to be a performer, and I had had like some sort of upper respiratory thing. And then I went to go perform for a summer in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And, you do 2 shows a day sometimes, no days off. And so I developed nodes, and they told me that I was going to lose my voice forever if I didn't go on vocal rest. So I had to finish out the summer. So I would go the entire day without saying a word and then do the performance. And then for 2 months afterwards, I had to speak as little as possible. So for a really lengthy period of time, I was communicating. I eventually tied a string of yarn with a notepad over my neck and a pen so that I could, write notes to people. We all want vocal speech. Vocal speech is faster. It's, listen, it's like I'm making up for it now. I talk so much because I'll never forget it. And I think we all should spend a couple of months trying that to see what it is like for a person who is nonverbal, right? Non-vocal. Because actually verbal behavior is what I just did, using our hands, communicating, pointing, our facial expressions, right? Those are all expressive. And we need to remember that only something like 18% of communication in the neurotypical world is vocal. So we always want to be shoring up all expressive language, because that is the ability. Hi, Nasser. And hi, Ivani. We want to be building up expressive language. We want for people to be able to communicate their needs. And so sometimes that means giving them a functional communication that is not necessarily vocal. That doesn't mean we're giving up on vocal speech, but it means that we are giving somebody the right to be able to communicate their needs in the way that they can access right now. So I know there are many of you out there that may have a child who is not yet speaking, and you're concerned about it. I want to make sure you're getting good ABA and that you have a speech pathologist who's working with you. We want to rule out things like apraxia. And if it is apraxia, we want to get busy working in a different way than we would if it's not apraxia. We have to keep that in mind, because we always want it to be fair. And for those individuals, it is harder. And we want to make sure that we're doing things that are productive, right? But if someone is having a significant time difficulty accessing vocal speech, we need to give them another form of communication. And the studies have shown very clearly that individuals that we give assistive device, for instance, an iPad, or have them do PECs, that they are more likely to get to vocal speech if they're, there's a line, if they're able to vocalize, we double down on speech and just get her done, right? If that is a problem, then we give them functional communication a lot of times so that we can get to the vocal speech. It does not mean giving up. I always like to point that out. Okay, moving on. We always have a question of the day for you. And our question is, what message would you like to put on a t-shirt? If you could do anything and have it go viral, what message would you like to put on a t-shirt? And I can't wait to see what you guys say. The t-shirt that I wanted to make, I was asked to, because I love some Skills. Skills is a platform that has so many different things to help individuals who are on the autism spectrum. It's a tool. It's a massive toolbox. And my son was a CARD client and the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And I like the biggest fan of Skills. And I said that I wanted to make t-shirts that said CARD parents do it with Skills. They thought it was a little too suggestive. Okay, Jacinda says warrior mom. I like it. I like it. What else would you guys put on a t-shirt? This year is so different with gifting and things like that. And I was thinking about, for gifts for friends and family, making individual t-shirts. Somebody said that they would put love teaching autistic kids. Okay. If you could be anything in the world, be kind. Everyone has a story. Be kind. I love these, you guys. let's open a t-shirt shop and like donate money to an autism charity. I don't know. Just a thought. But anyway, keep those coming in because I massively, massively love them. We always have a topic of the week, and our topic this week is using your voice. Now, I know that's power packed because when I say voice, I'm not just talking about the vocal production of sound, right? I think it's super important that we all have, as several of you said, everybody has a story. And I think that everybody has a viewpoint, and being able to convey your viewpoint to other people in order to A, get your needs met, and B, to be a part of society. It doesn't necessarily mean that you change someone else's mind. I think we see a lot of that going on right now, that everybody has, oh, I love this t-shirt, making a difference through my autism story. Love it. Because that's using your voice. Using your voice means standing up when there's a bully, right? Using your voice means saying no. Using your voice means being able to teach other people to be able to say no. Autism teaching is great. I'm loving these t-shirts because they're all about having a voice. I don't know if you guys know the Peers program. And in fact, I need to make a note that we need to bring, I can't think what her name is right now, but the wonderful, wonderful lady, we've had her before on the show, that started the Peers program. And we need to bring her back on the show. But the Peers program, she invented it as a way to teach our kids, teenagers, to navigate the difficult social world that is our world. Because let's face it, it was hard enough to be teenagers when all of us were teenagers. Now with cell phones and TikTok and there's that much more. So she created the Peers program, and what I especially love about it is Liz Lageson. That's who it is, Dr. Liz Lageson. I knew it would come to me eventually. But it's 2 courses that are run at the same time. So the teenagers are taking the course and they're working together on things and they get homework. But in another room or on another Zoom call, the parents are also taking a course where they're learning how to support their teens and what the homework is so that we'll be successful. I don't know about the rest of you, but thank you, Elizabeth Lageson. I don't know about the rest of you, but sometimes somebody will assign my son some homework, but if I don't know what it is, I don't know whether he did it, and I don't know whether he did it right, and I can't support him in it. I might as well be with blinders, right? So I love that the Peers program fills the basket for the parents so that you know what to do too. And I have not been through the whole program. I went through part of a training for one. And one of the best tips I got just from having, been there for one day of training was t-shirts. That your t-shirt that you wear on your person is a billboard. It sends a message out to the world and says, hey, this is what I think, or this is what I like, or this is who I am, or, these are the colors that look good on me. It sends a message. Even a white t-shirt sends a message. And one of the things that Dr. Lageson says is that if your child is not in a school uniform, when they are out with people, that is billboard space, and that we should use it mindfully. And that, for instance, if you are wearing a t-shirt, and this is a perfect example for my son, because we utilized this when he started high school. His high school has a 2-day boot camp that all the freshmen go on. And it's the only time that they're not in a school uniform. So we spent the summer finding the 2 perfect t-shirts. We wanted it to be something that had something that said, hey, I'm into certain video games, but we didn't want the whole general public to know what it meant. We wanted it to be only people who would get it, who like a specific game that he likes. So that was what one day was. And the next day it was some music that he liked. And it was insane that so many people came up to him and said, hey, dude, I like your t-shirt. That's so-and-so from such and such game. And he still has that group of friends, and they are tight. They are online together every night during this COVID. They will be the best men at each other's weddings. You know what I'm saying? All because of the t-shirt. And not only did it help him to get friends, but it helped for the group because somebody would come up and go, dude, I like your t-shirt. And then another person would come up, and then the three of them became friends. So that is using your voice, your t-shirt, and that is a form of expressive language. See how I tied that all together? Did you see that? I know it's early in the morning, but I'm trying. So I think it's important that we think about, how are we using our voice? How are we connecting? How are we helping others to use their voices? Could you possibly tell me how we can get involved in the Peers program and how card parents get more information on the Peers program? Yeah, so the Peers program is out of UCLA, and you can reach out specifically to them, and they do courses all the time right now, and they're available. I believe they're doing them on Zoom. So you can reach directly out to UCLA to do that. If you're a card family, and remember that there's more than one card, right? I'm talking about the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. If you are a member of that card family, then we have lots of people who are trained in the Peers program, and reach out to your supervisor and ask them if there is an online, I know they've been talking about it. I don't know that anybody has actually started an online group yet. I know it was something that but if they get enough interest, they will. So definitely reach out. If they said, how can we purchase t-shirts for you? Maybe some custom. I don't make t-shirts. I'm just talking about it. So we'll see if maybe Autism Live will put out a couple of t-shirts. We won't steal your ideas though, you guys. But maybe we'll do that as a fundraiser. I don't know. Just thinking about it, right? Because I was thinking about, the Peers program and the whole t-shirt thing. And believe me, there are tons of, we even did this right before we went back to distance learning, because we are requiring our son to have his camera on, and a lot of other students, their parents aren't. What can I say? It's not what we're doing. It's not what I think is best for education. I'm a former teacher, and I don't know how you teach if you can't see your students. If they were in the classroom, yeah. I know many teachers who are visually impaired who are able to do that. But if you were to tell them, oh, now you have to do it on Zoom and you can't see them, I think anybody would tell you, listen, you're really making it hard for me to teach, really making it hard for me to teach. So I knew my kid was going to be on camera, and I said, we're right back there, let's pick out some t-shirts that will be super cool for you to feel good and to send that message to people. This is who I am. So, and thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer, I was just saying that we have to get you on the show. So remind me, I owe you a phone call, but thank you for putting up the link for Peers for Ivani. And for putting instructions about it. We absolutely appreciate that. Now, Traven, is Bonnie with us before I get too far out of whack here? Yes, no, maybe so. Yes, Bonnie is there. So let's go ahead and bring Bonnie Yates in. Bonnie Yates is a special education attorney extraordinaire. She works with Tollner Law Offices, and she is amazing. Hi, Bonnie.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Shannon. Nice to be here as always.
Well, we're thrilled that you're here. Talk to us a little bit about Tollner Law Offices and how people can reach out to them and to you, if you would.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm going to talk quickly about Tollner Law Offices. We're an 8-attorney firm in California, Northern and Southern. We do the whole state. We have an attorney that's licensed to practice in Arizona as well, and also Nevada. So if you are in any of those states, potentially we can offer you a free consultation. If you aren't, and you need a lawyer, which you probably do, because you probably, basically every family, as far as I'm concerned, that has an IEP needs somebody to sit down and explain to them the IEP process. The district isn't going to do it. The district gives you your procedural safeguards, and that's all they have to do in order to satisfy their legal obligation to educate you. But the education process is so much more. And typically on the show, we say, hey, if you have a specific legal problem, you should talk to an attorney in your state that's licensed and knowledgeable about special education. And we mentioned COPA to you, COPAA.net, because those attorneys are part of the national organization. And basically, frankly, people don't belong to that organization unless they care about special ed. Here's the deal. I've been lucky enough recently to interact with some people on Autism Live who reached out to me independently of the show to have a consultation. And surprise, surprise, I haven't really talked to anybody yet who doesn't have specific issues. I mean, I think every person does have specific issues. And the reason they have specific issues is they don't understand the systemic problems of special ed are not unique to their school or their district. They're nationwide because it's an underfunded mandate. And so when we sit down and we talk with parents, there's a whole lot of preheating of the oven cycle where we just have to explain to you how the system really works as opposed to what you've been told. In the autism context, if I get a 3 or 4-year-old, more times than not, people haven't adequately explained to that family how brain plasticity works and how ABA therapy works. So I'm rambling a little bit, and we are going to talk about things of general interest on the show. I hope they're of general interest. But in terms of your specific situation, I can't imagine now if you're a parent with an IEP that you wouldn't want to talk with somebody about how your distance learning plan is working, how to tweak it if it isn't working, what to do if you need to get out of it entirely. And the people I've talked to from Autism Live, they've been like super respectful and almost like self-deprecating, like, oh, is it okay if I ask you this? And I'm like, well, hey, listen, this is what I'm here for. I'm practically 62 years old. There's not a whole lot left to do except for, try to reach out to a bunch more of you, before I am no longer able to do this work. So don't be shy. Your case is worth it. Talk to an attorney in your state and get help. Because these are very challenging times. And when we talk with parents now, we answer their general questions and then they're like, oh God, now I have to explain to them how everything I told them doesn't apply now because school is closed. So then we have to have the part B of the discussion. So I did some reading over the weekend. I wanted to look at the new cases, the new California cases, to see what kinds of issues were coming up. Specifically, I wanted to know what kind of guidance we were getting in terms of administrative decisions.
Asking, can we make sure that we have your email address or where they could contact you at Tollner, because people are asking before you get into this.
Yeah, of course. Do I just type it?
No. Just tell us what your email.
B as in Bonnie, Y as in Yates. So BY, capital BY, capital B, capital Y, small ATES at Tollner, TOLLNER, lawoffices.com. Anyway, what I wanted to see was what kind of administrative guidance we were getting about these distance learning plan problems. And there were 5 decisions. The 2 that were about those issues we've already talked about on the show. So I read the rest of the decisions, and based on stuff that came up in those decisions, I'm just going to hit you guys with a whole bunch of stuff that I think is germane. Okay, one is we end up in situations where parents don't understand the purpose of the triennial evaluation, and they don't get a good triennial evaluation. And the law changed about, 5 or 7 years ago, and now parents can waive the triennial evaluation. You should never, ever, 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 in my opinion, waive your triennial evaluation. Because if you do that, and then later you decide you need an evaluation at district expense, you won't have one to attack. But there was a triennial evaluation in one of the cases that I was reading, and I thought, well, let me just talk to the parents about what is this triennial evaluation? Well, you know that when you first, sorry, I don't know, I've got to turn my phone off, I guess, because it, can you hear me, Shannon, or no? Yeah, sorry.
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that, you guys. I have to kill my phone. I figured out how to kill my phone. Okay, so, you have your initial evaluation at age 3. Theoretically, that's the soonest you could have IDEA services. And then there's another evaluation 3 years later. And, parents might be like, God, I'm so burnt out on all this. I'm stressed. I don't really want to put my kid through another evaluation. So I wanted you to just understand where the triennial evaluation fits. into the general framework. So let me just read you a little bit about the triennial evaluation. It's different than the annual evaluation, because the annual evaluation is just like a progress assessment, essentially, and it doesn't require a reassessment, although you can ask for a reassessment anytime you feel like you need one. But the triennial evaluation is going to revisit the question of whether the student is still eligible for special education and related services. And you could either view that as like, well, that's, crappy. They're going to try to take away my eligibility. I think the other way of looking at it would be, no, we want to make sure that if your child doesn't qualify anymore, that we sort of are not saddling him with a bunch of obligations that might not be educationally relevant. So, as I said, the annual doesn't require an assessment, but the triennial does. So the thing
Can I just ask a question, Bonnie, in your experience? Because I know a lot of people who have had a hard time getting an IEP to begin with,
Yeah.
but once people have an IEP, I don't know a single parent where the school was like pressuring them to get rid of the IEP. In fact, I know parents who said, I'd like to let the IEP go, and that they've said, no, you still qualify. In your experience, though, as an attorney, have you once, I see that it's really hard to get into the groove and get your services started, but once services start, I don't see schools understanding that a child could get to the point where they no longer need services. What about from your point of view?
LA Unified, for kids that had intensive ABA, started targeting those kids if they were high functioning. And I've done a case, and I know there are more, where they said that the autism had no educational impact, and they tried to make the student ineligible.
Okay. All right.
Parents would be afraid to consent to the reevaluation, like, oh, they're going to take away my eligibility and my services. That is right. It's true, Shannon. It's pretty unlikely. It does happen. It's certainly not our biggest,
Okay.
Okay, so the purpose of the triennial evaluation is twofold: to verify that the student continues to have a disability potentially affecting their opportunity to access the general curriculum, and to identify the student's current educational needs, including the appropriate educational placement and any services needed to support the student's access to the curriculum. So that is the requirement, unless you waive in writing your right to a triennial evaluation. So I wanted to mention that to you. Also, sort of interestingly and strangely, generally, if you're in your 12th grade year and you're about to graduate, right, with a high school diploma, even if your tri or your annual falls during that time period, they don't do a reevaluation because they figure you're gone by June. So if you want, a reevaluation and you're going to graduate from high school with a high school diploma in the next little bit, if you want the kid to be, or the student to be reevaluated, you're going to need to ask them to do that and kind of talk them into the whys of that. Does that make sense? Okay.
Totally.
Okay. Total change in topic. In the course of reading these decisions, there was a very, very interesting case against Los Angeles Unified School District. And it was unusual, and so I decided I wanted to talk to you about it. The reason it was unusual is because the question or the issue was, did Los Angeles Unified School District deny student a FAPE by abusing student during the 2019-2020 school year? So this was a 4-year-old student, and he had a speech and language impairment. That was what his eligibility was. Now, after I read the decision, I realized that what's really going on here is that this case is paving the way for a civil lawsuit that the law firm is going to file. I mean, I haven't confirmed this, but I think it's what's going on. Under applicable law, if you want to file like a damages action for Section 504 or ADA claims, you have to quote, exhaust administrative remedies first. So this family is probably not done, but they got a very, interesting and good and unusual decision, and I wanted to share it with you. So the student was in a class with a teacher who admittedly was understaffed and didn't have any special ed training. She was a 33-year veteran teacher. And the evidence was that he started the school year with no behavior problems, happy and cheerful. Within 3 weeks, he became aggressive, off task, and had a lot of interfering behaviors. So you can see the stage is being set for a problem because she's going to need some skills that she doesn't have. I'm sad to say that I think this goes on more often than we hear about. This was an unusual case because there were some eyewitnesses, and so the thing got reported and investigated rather than, just sort of like the parents making the whole thing up. So one of the questions OAH, the Office of Administrative Hearings, had to answer was, did they even have jurisdiction over these abuse claims? Because those are not theoretically special education claims, but they said that basically if the alleged abuse resulted in a deprivation of, or a denial of FAPE, they had jurisdiction, and they took jurisdiction essentially to review the facts. So what they found.
Excuse me 1 second. That, to me, I just have a problem with that, because how could anybody, if there is abuse, and abuse is a big word, there's so many different types of abuse, but if we're saying that somebody is being abused in a learning situation, how could that not affect their FAPE?
Well, you don't have to go there. You just have to see how it all rolled out in this case, and it'll make more sense, I think. Okay, so OAH basically said they looked at the district did this investigation and concluded that the teacher should not be prevented from returning to the classroom. Now, they removed her from the classroom and put her on paid administrative leave, but she was back 2 weeks later. And so the question was, what were the things she did that constituted a denial of FAPE or potential denial of FAPE? Well, one thing was, apparently during nap time in her class, the student would be kind of rambunctious. And so she took him one day and put him out of the classroom, and the principal found him sleeping on a dirty rug outside her door. The other issue involved a day when she was obviously again having trouble with him, and she took him outside, and his grandfather, I guess, had just dropped him off at school or was bringing something to school, and his grandfather saw her with the kid, and he was like, oh my God, that's, the student. And then he saw her shake the student hard for, I don't know, 5 or 10 or 15 seconds or something. So OAH looked at this in terms of, were those behavioral interventions that she used legal or not? And did they deny him a FAPE? So he was in TK, and his only services were 120 minutes a week of speech and language. And I always wonder, and I think this might be me being too, influenced by my autism experience, but I'm always suspicious when somebody just has a speech and language problem, that there's not more going on from either a language learning, specific learning disability problem, or do they have some soft signs of autism? That wasn't covered. The teacher had asked for more help at the beginning of the year. She said she was overwhelmed, and they didn't give her that help. She'd only had 3 IEP students prior to the student. She had no background in special ed, no behavior training, and as I said, he started to act out. So she had a school psychologist come into her classroom, but the school psychologist did not offer extra services. The school psychologist said, some of your communications with him are too language overpowering, and he can't do it. So you've got to modify the way you're delivering the instruction. So probably if the principal hadn't seen him sleeping outside, and then the grandfather hadn't observed the shaking, nobody would have known what was going on with this little 4-year-old. But what happened, I think, was the dam broke, and then people couldn't be complicit and quiet anymore. They were going to get in trouble.
So Bonnie, did the principal do something when he saw him sleeping outside on a dirty rug? What was the upshot of that?
He took him to his office and let him sleep on the couch.
But the teacher wasn't reprimanded or put on administrative leave?
Not to my knowledge at that point, no.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, the putting him outside like that, is considered to be an inappropriate behavior intervention because he's not adequately supervised. So that's California Education Code 56521.2. Anyway, what happened was, once the grandfather observed the shaking incident and they did the investigation and they returned her to the classroom, they took him out of school. And he was out of school for 6 weeks prior to being able to enroll in a new school. So part of what the decision is looking at is whether or not he's going to get comp ed for those 6 weeks. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on in this decision. But if we have time or a little more time, I thought it was so interesting that I actually decided to talk, about the decision in depth. Okay. Because when I started reading this, I was like, this will probably just be another kiss off. Usually these things don't really get properly addressed. But I was really pleased to see that that wasn't the case. And it was some combination of, he was only 4, for God's sakes, and also that the people that testified from the school district, and you can read the decision and their names are public, they were viewed by the hearing officer as not credible. Like, the principal was kind of trying to cover for what he did, and the teacher was trying to cover for what she did. But then there was some third person who was a witness who basically, I think, just like called it the way he saw it. So they concluded that LA Unified committed a prohibited intervention, that was likely to cause pain. And I will supply you, I brought them to the show, but we might run out of time, but I will supply you with the education code sections on emergency behavioral interventions. But the gist of it is that you have to, first of all, you cannot use interventions that cause pain or humiliate the student or are an affront to their dignity. You have to use positive behavior interventions. And if you have what's called an emergency behavioral intervention, in California, you have to notify the parents within 1 school day so that the parents have a chance to weigh in on whether these emergency behavior interventions should be used in lieu of planned systematic behavioral interventions. And you're supposed to have a behavioral emergency report immediately completed and put in the file of the student. So you can guess where this is all going. LAUSD did not do those things. Okay. They didn't do that. They didn't do the report within 2 days. And then what they're supposed to do after the report is prepared is schedule an IEP meeting to review the emergency report, to determine the necessity for a functional behavior assessment, and to determine the necessity for an interim plan. So the district didn't do any of that. LA Unified did not schedule an IEP team meeting to address the behavioral emergency students education program or determine the extent to which intervention supports or services, including positive behavior interventions, might be needed, and if necessary, reevaluate student. The prohibited interventions and parents' removal of student from the classroom were significant events impacting students' educational needs. Accordingly, an IEP team meeting should have been promptly convened to consider students' needs and supports, as well as remedy any denial of FAPE. Because Los Angeles failed to complete a behavior emergency report or schedule a timely IEP after the shaking incident, it resulted in an educational loss to student. Students' education program was in limbo when Los Angeles should have been taking action to ensure student received the services in his IEP. These failures impeded students' ability to access his gen ed program for the 6-week period he was out of school and resulted in an educational loss. So then they go on to examine how the 2 prohibited interventions resulted in a loss of educational opportunity for the student, and they determine how much comp ed he's entitled to. And the judge says specifically, in analyzing the impact of the two prohibited interventions used, the young age of the student and his speech and language impairment were considered. They go on to talk about the need, the education code codifies the need for positive behavior interventions. I'm not going to go into all of that, but the point was, it was an unusually good decision. I mean, horrible circumstances, but taking seriously the question of inadequate or inappropriate behavior support. When a child's behavior impedes a child's learning or that of others, the IEP team must consider strategies, including positive behavior interventions and supports to address that behavior. When behavior intervention supports and other strategies are used, they must be used in consideration of the student's physical freedom and social interaction and be administered in a manner that respects human dignity and personal privacy. Hold on one sec. Yeah. Aversive behavior interventions are negative consequences or stimuli used to change a student's problematic and disruptive behavior. So basically, Shannon has said a lot of times on the show that she's very sympathetic to teachers in situations where they aren't given the tools they need to do the things they need to do for students. And clearly that's the issue here, but you can sort of see how things can go very wrong in a short time when people don't have the supports they needed. I mean, I don't even get the impression from reading the decision that this kid was a particularly behavioral kid until he started being on the receiving end of the teacher's frustration. So there's just no way, having said all this, that Shannon isn't going to have like 15 things to say. So let's let her rip.
Well, as a former teacher and as a teacher who has been in a classroom and said, I'm having behavior issues, I need some help. I know what it's like when your principal and your school doesn't have anything. It's like the Wizard of Oz when, they go into the bag and he goes, oh, I don't have anything for you. It's not an excuse for being abusive to a child. If you are in the job and you don't know what to do and you reach out to your superiors and they don't help you, that is not an excuse to abuse a child. Just want to say that. And I think that any good teacher worth her salt would agree with me, right?
She abused him and then she lied about it when she got caught. She said it was a behavioral technique that his speech therapist was using with him, the shaking.
Yeah. Well, she's somebody who should have retired before this. But I tell you whose feet I lay it at. I think the principal. If the principal, when you are a principal, you are on campus and you are responsible for all of those kids and you're responsible to know that the teachers are teaching them and not being abusive. I've seen good principals and I've seen bad principals. And I've seen how good principals run their school and they make sure that someone from admin walks through every single classroom unannounced every single day. And if, I would say to parents, if you want to get a feel for, is your child at a good school, ask, does that happen? Because it should be happening. There's too much that happens in schools that somebody doesn't have eyes on. But the principal did have an eye on something. That's why I said.
I think the principal's hope was that he was just going to be able to talk to her after the first incident and then it would all go away. I'm sure he wasn't down for having an internal investigation and then having the police be involved.
Yeah. Well, that person deserves to lose his job because he didn't feel like checking it out for a child. That goes against everything that they are supposed to do as a principal. So I have no patience with that principal. Just saying. Our kids, when we turn over our kids to be with people, to be educated, we have an expectation, and this was not met. And it, you can tell it riles me right up. But I'm so glad that you shared this with us, because I think that there are nuances to this that we need to know as parents how wrong this is. And so this is really good, valuable information. I want to know, we did have somebody, we've got a couple of minutes, Bonnie. We did have somebody who wrote in a question.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure that I understand the question. But she tells us that she's got 2 children, one that is autistic but another one, her non-autistic child is someone who cannot switch off before bed. The school said that they were going to do a referral. Now, I assume that that's a referral to get her tested. I don't know. But they go on to say that the teacher said she wasn't sure now and that they aren't having assessments in school because of COVID, that she thinks she's just going to leave the situation as it is. And mom thinks that that's a kick in the teeth. So mom says, yes, that's right. So we've talked about this a lot with you about when they use the excuse for COVID and not doing assessments. What do you want to say to this mom?
California Department of Education compliance complaint.
If they're not in California, because I don't know for this family, if they're not in California, is it the same everywhere? We're just not sure.
Well, it is not necessarily the same everywhere, because CDE has been doing a great job of working with the districts and figuring out these assessment issues. In your own state.
They're in the UK. That's even harder.
Okay, well, let's just answer the question generally.
Okay.
I don't know what the laws are at all in the UK, but in the 50 states here, there would be something called child find, which basically means, if your child is not eligible for special education and related services, but they should be. Sorry, hold on. Sorry. No problem.
We know you're a busy lady.
Well, only when I'm on the air. So they have a duty to search out and identify and assess kids in their catchment area that potentially need special education and related services. And so CDE stands for California Department of Education. But anyway, the point is, if the district knows that this kid is suspected of having some kind of a disability based on his bedtime behaviors, the threshold for the assessment is low and they need to do an assessment. If they don't, and they're in the United States, and that student continues not to be identified, if somewhere down the line that student gets identified, they're going to have the problem of having had a basis of knowledge and not having investigated properly.
There you go. And I think we all need to be pushing back when people use the excuse of COVID. There's all kinds of times when school districts have said to me, well, we can't do this because, and it's something that has to do with them. And my pat response for them is, oh, right. I'll ask him not to have autism during COVID, or I'll ask him not to have autism during the AIDS lunch break. Do you know what I mean? Just to show them the redonkulousness of their response.
They know that it's ridiculous, but this is all they have is distance learning, and they're pretending that it's fine. I want to go back to the child find for a second, if I have another minute.
Yeah, you do.
Because again, my handy dandy special ed connection checklist on child find says these are the things that you as a district want to be doing to identify kids in your catchment area that might have autism, that might have a disability. And I think this will be interesting to you because it's not just like, oh, the teacher who works with him observes. So what the public schools are supposed to be doing, first of all, is publishing information in the local newspaper annually and on its website about the IDEA process. So that's one thing, is publishing in public papers. Number two, the district sends its child find notices to all area clinics, doctors, preschools, and daycare centers in conjunction with preschool screening activities, usually conducted with local preschools and Head Start. Okay, so that's another thing that you probably weren't aware of. The district screens all children entering kindergarten to identify children with suspected disabilities. Universal screening, people. That's what we should be doing. Typically, the early education teacher, special educator, speech language pathologist, and school psychologists implement the screening. That's, so important, and I'm not at all sure that it goes on in many districts. The district screens all transfer students to identify those students who may have been receiving special education and related services in their prior district, which would, of course, give rise to a presumption that you continue to need them in your new district. The district distributes to the parents of older students who are new to the district a handbook on the school district special services. The handbook also contains directions on who to contact if the parents suspect their child may have a disability. The district requests that parents and guardians complete a detailed questionnaire. Questions may address school history, present medical status, previous diagnoses and treatments, and home behaviors. The district considers all parent and teacher referrals, not making those people feel guilty that they're referring. And then the last one, the district student services team, the SST team, or the teacher assistant team reviews the files of all students with a health plan to screen for special disabilities. So you can see that the child find obligation is quite broad. It's actually, it's intended to work. The idea is to not leave anybody behind, right?
Yes, I will say that we appear to have a large UK audience today, and that is a United States thing. And we're like out of time, so I want to say first of all to Daniel, who just wrote in a question about potty training. Please, can you resubmit the question on another day? Because unfortunately we are out of time. Really quickly, Avani wants to know: can we bring a psychologist from outside to the school district?
Do it all the time. We do it every IEP meeting.
Yeah. They're gonna find some issues though when they go to bring an outside psychologist. When the psychologist wants to observe, of course, it's all different right now because of COVID, right?
Well, they can do the distance learning program.
Yes, but in the past, when you've wanted to have a psychologist come to view in school, your district could put limits on how long they could watch. I know
we talked about that on the show, and we could talk about it again, but 15 minutes is an unreasonable limitation. We're usually able to get 90 minutes or 2 hours because we know what the law is. If that's something people would like to hear again, we could talk about that next week.
Okay. I want to make sure though that we just put that out there. Any website I can find all about the Child Find, where would they go to find that information?
Rights law, special education rights and responsibilities, or if you just Google Child Find, you'll find a lot of stuff. Google Scholar.
Bonnie, you're amazing.
I mean, the Child Find is the law in all the states, and people don't know about it. And where it becomes important is if the district doesn't find you eligible for 6 months or a year, they're going to owe you compensatory education for the special education you should have gotten and didn't get in that time period. Anyway.
Really good thing. We are out of time, so I want you to take a minute here to just tell us about Tollner Law Offices, where we can find you and where we can find them.
Okay, well, I'm going to totally override that because I'm sure people can Google Tollner Law Offices.
Okay.
My T-shirt, people, says one foot in front of another, brain plasticity rocks.
Brain plasticity rocks. That's amazing.
So this is a super slog, and you guys are all doing incredible work, not only educating your child, but educating yourselves. And I'm telling you, if you can just make sure you have enough oxygen and put one foot in front of another, and you keep doing this, education works. That's my, so maybe that's my T-shirt. Education works.
I love your T-shirt. And we put on the screen Tollner Law Offices, and the website is specialeducationcouncil.com. And they said you were both extremely helpful today, and extremely all in caps. And I like it when we're helpful. So, and I know you're always helpful, Bonnie. Thank you so much for being with us. We're totally out of time. Have a great week.
You too. Take care.
All right, bye-bye. I just want to say to you guys, tomorrow on the show, we have the best of Temple Grandin, where it is a pre-recorded set of interviews that we have done with her. You'll want to check that out. But on Wednesday, we're back here live with Dr. Doreen Grampichet. On Thursday, we've got a mom blogger that you are going to love. Kirsten, I think is how you say it properly, Hunter is going to be with us from the blog Behind His Eyes. So that's on Thursday. And then on Friday, you guys asked for the research about genetics and autism, and our people got it together, and they're presenting on it to you on Friday during Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. That's our week. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
We had a couple of questions that came in before. I don't really know where to turn, but I'm at a loss for answers. My father and I both use CPAPs for sleep apnea. Me too. And lately, my 11-year-old sister has taken to destroying mine. I'm not sure what her classification on the spectrum is, but the general understanding in my family is that it's just how she is. And just now, she's coming out of her terrible twos stage. I really don't know what to do. I tried hiding it, but she managed to pick it and find it and pick it apart. She picked apart the nose cushions 5 times now. And today I came into my room and found her taking a nap on my bed with the hose stretched apart until the material tore, making it impossible to even jerry-rig a solution until I can get replacements. This is the 2nd time with the hose and now the 6th time with the nose cushions. I honestly wanted to yell at her, scream until my throat was sore because she keeps destroying the one thing that keeps me breathing at night. But I knew it would be pointless. She doesn't seem to connect us punishing her with what she did unless it happens as she does it. If I could lock my door, I would, but I'm forced to share my room with my younger brother. And frankly, he can't remember where he moved something 5 minutes ago, let alone remembering to lock the door. If he'd even if he'd agreed to it. I'm just at my limit, and I know the next few days are going to be an irritable and sleep-deprived hell until I can get my replacement parts. And even after that, I don't know how to keep her from destroying it again. Can you guys please help me? Sending this sister much, much love. This is tough stuff. What do you think, Dr.?
Yeah, it really is. It breaks my heart to hear that you're struggling with this. You know, I think you need to have a sit down with your parents, and they need to hear you and help you find a closet that you can put the machine in and lock it up, because obviously they're trying to be very understanding of the fact that your sister is doing these things to the machine. But at the same time, I feel like they need to also hear you. And sometimes it's hard for parents when they're very engaged in trying to help one child. They often will unintentionally not hear the requests for help from another child. So I really think that you should go back, talk to them, and explain to them that you're at your wit's end and you really need your machine and so on, so that they can help you lock it up. Now, having said that, it could be that your sister sees that you have the machine and your parents have the machine, and she is thinking that she would like to have her own as well. In other words, I'm not sure if she understands what the CPAP machine is for, and perhaps she feels like, this is something that that you guys have, and she wants to have her own, like she just wants to be in. So that's maybe why she's using your machine. Maybe if you guys have a broken machine laying around or an old one or something, maybe you could give that to her so she could use her own and stop trying to come and use yours and accidentally destroy yours. The other alternative is just to, really find a place quickly that you can lock it up, like a closet or something, because I do think that it'll take a while and there's no telling, she might come back and destroy it again. I don't think she's doing this on purpose. You just need to know that. I think you do. And you're being very, very nice about it and very understanding about it. I think she's either trying to imitate what she sees you guys doing, which it sounds like she did, or she's also interested in the spongy part of the mask. So could be one of those things.
Yeah, and because I use a CPAP, boy, I feel it for you, because I know if I don't get to use my CPAP during the day, I'm like, a crazy person. I just can't even concentrate, right? So I feel your pain. But there are parts, like the parts you're describing that she takes apart, those are easily detachable. In fact, they encourage you to take those parts off every day and wash them. And those aren't that big, Dr. Grandpichet. So
Yeah.
you can take the hose off, and you can take with the mask parts, and I'm sure you can find some place that's secret or can be locked or whatever. But I love that you mentioned that it's not with malice. She probably wants to be like you. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time I saw somebody who had one was my mom, and I was like, what is all this contraption? It's kind of cool. So yeah, but please take care of yourself. And I'm sending that sister love, because it sounds like you have a lot of things as a sister that you have to put up with. So we are sending you love. I want to go to a question, because somebody had written in the question last week, and we got into a thing with the chat where I wasn't able to see it. So they say, I'm the mom from last week. My son is 5 and almost nonverbal. He recently started to imitate others. I observed him imitating when not required to. It's like he can't control himself. For example, when the therapist tries to fix her hair, he would copy her action. Should I stop him from inappropriate imitating, or should I just ignore that?
So is this the same? Unfortunately, I can't see the question, Shannon, but is this the same? There's another section that goes on, but regardless, maybe it's another part of another question. I'm not sure. But what I wanted to oh,
I'm muted.
there you go.
You couldn't hear me.
I don't have.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I'm not controlling it, as you know. So, but I'd be happy to do anything you guys want me to do if you tell me how to do it. But
you're doing great. But there is another part of the question.
Shannon, I lost you again.
Okay, why is it muting?
Here, now you're back.
Okay, can you still hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So there is a boy he always sits with at school. His teacher told me he likes to copy that boy too. This makes the other boy upset with my child. If the teacher blocks my child from copying, he gets upset. So I think we have the whole picture now.
Yeah. So I think this is, imitation is a good thing, but it's not always a good thing. So we need to get it under SD control, or get it under your control. So in other words, you should start to help your child differentiate. And the way that you do that is when it's okay to imitate, or when you actually want him to imitate, then you will precede the imitation by saying, do this. And then you will allow him to imitate or say this, or whatever instruction you'd like. And the rest of the time, you don't give that instruction. And so by doing this, you're teaching the child to discriminate. And so when you don't want him to imitate, let's say the child next to him or in some other circumstance, then you physically block him from imitating, or you give him something else to do that is incompatible. So if it's an imitation that involves, let's say, his hands, then you would give him some other activity to do with his hands. If it's a vocal imitation, then you could have him sing or say his ABC, something incompatible. When you do want him to imitate, then you will just give him an instruction like imitate or say this or do this or something like that. So this way you're helping him understand that under certain circumstances it's okay, under other circumstances it's not. Make sense?
Totally makes sense. We really appreciate that. Okay, we have a question about what is considered punishment. When I'm having my son practice handwriting a sentence, I erase his letters or words if it is not legible. Is that considered a form of punishment?
That's a great question. And so punishment, like reinforcement, is different for different people. So it's not necessarily defined by its topography or how it looks. It's defined by the results that it has. In other words, anything you do that results in a reduction of his behavior, any stimulus that you present and that reduces his behavior would be classified as punishing, or aversive. So it could be that erasing something is punishment for him. It could be that erasing something would be reinforcing for someone else. So that's kind of how you look at it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with what you're doing. I also want to say that, because I know that a lot of people kind of see anything that's titled as punishing as being a bad thing. But the truth is, sometimes you have to have consequences. That's right. And sometimes those consequences are negative. And for our kids to realize that if I write, let's say, where I'm not supposed to write, someone is going to come and erase it. It's not going to stay there. And that could be unpleasant, but nevertheless, it is a real consequence that needs to occur.
Okay, and they asked, what if the child refuses to hold a squish ball or a fidget toy when engaging in motor stereotypic movement?
Are the motor stereotypic movements hand-based or body-based? Because if they are hand-based, there are other things you could do. For instance, you could have the child put their hands in their pocket. You could have the child sit on their hands. There are other things you can do. If they're body-related, then they need to involve the whole body.
And here's where I just want to say, as a parent, sometimes we get upside down. That, we hear, oh, if your child is, doing something, give them something, put something in their hands so that it competes with the thing. But I want to remind everybody that, and you tell us this all the time, Dr. Granpeesheh, that the behavior that they're doing for a reason. And if we don't stop, we can't leave out the step where we go, what is the reason for that? So that whatever the motor stereotypic behavior is, some of our kids flap. They don't all flap for the same reason, you guys. Some of them flap because they see colors as they're doing this. Some of them flap because the movement is a way to get their emotions. It feels good, right? There are different aspects of it. And if you try to compete with it, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Granpeesheh, if you try to just blanket do something, often what you're doing won't help with the behavior. So I see us a lot of times go, and I'll tell you where I see it the most is when parents start to learn extinction procedures and they go, oh, I'm supposed to ignore that. And then the parents generalize that I'm supposed to ignore all behavior that my child does, not just the behavior that was trying to get attention. So giving a child something to hold on to may not solve the function. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely. You're correct. But I just saw that mom's chat pop up. It's not about just offering him some options and then kind of letting it go. You have to teach that behavior. You have to teach every behavior, including the replacement behavior. So whether it's holding an object or putting his hands in his pocket, you shape that up. So someone has to be present. And if the child drops, let's say, the toy you've given him, you have to give it back to him. You have to increase the duration of time that he's holding the swoosh ball or the object that you've given him to block him from hand flapping. And you have to reward progressively longer periods of time. So you may just give him an object, he holds it for 1 second, and you cheer and reward that. But you have to continue to increase the duration of time. over time. This is called shaping. It doesn't happen. It's not as easy, unfortunately, as just saying, oh, he's hand flapping, I'm going to give him an object, and from here on, he's going to stop hand flapping. So you need to teach that. And also, Shannon is absolutely right. You have to identify what exactly it is that you are replacing. Is it I'll give you guys an example. I had a child who I was treating, and one of the most difficult behaviors for him, challenging for everyone, was that he would spit. And it was very, very difficult. And we tried a lot of the normal interventions that we do with spitting. For example, we would give him chewing gum. We would have him keep increasingly reward periods of time with his mouth closed, etc. And it just wouldn't work until we realized that the reward, the reinforcer that he was getting out of spitting was actually visual. He liked to be able to see how his spit, the angle of the spit, the trajectory. So it wasn't at all having to do with the spit itself. It had to do with the visual stim. And so then we began to replace it with things like bubbles and anything that would give him that visual self-stimulation that he was seeking. So it is very important to find out the self-stimulatory aspect of the behavior, so that when you're replacing the behavior, the child gets a similar reward out of it. Because remember, everything we do in order to gain some sort of reward from. So that's the key to it, is, find out what he's getting out of the behavior.
Wonderful. And she did go on to say that it is hand and body, but only hand while sitting in a chair. She says, I've offered all of these, but sometimes he won't use any of the techniques. He says sometimes he just needs to get his wiggles out. And I'll tell you who that reminds me of is the story of Logan Shepherd. For those of you who watch the show, there's an amazing, he's an adult now, but he's a professional drummer and has been a professional drummer since he was in his early teens. But, he was a person who did this. And you, Dr. Grampiche, and CARD as a whole recognized that there was a need here and turned this into something really functional. And he gave him some drumsticks, and the kid is a professional drummer. And I don't know if you've seen Dr. Grampiche. He has a video out right now. I'll find the link to it, that it encourages people to vote, and it's him and a band that he's playing with. He's on the drums, and there's a fabulous woman singing about how now is the moment, and it's interspersed with clips of Martin Luther King and saying, here, make your voice be heard. And it's just to get out the vote. It does not align with any party. It's a beautiful video. But a perfect example of, I think it's so important that we don't just gloss over and go, that behavior is just in the way, let's get rid of it. I don't think that takes into consideration the individual. It's one of the reasons why I love Dr. Grampiche so much, because she recognizes that these are people and that they have needs. And if he's saying he's got wiggles to get out, then he needs to, right? But finding a different way, but holding a koosh ball does not get your wiggles out.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. And that's kind of why I was saying that it's, you need to pay attention to kind of all aspects of it. If it's a body related thing, and if he needs to get his wiggles out, why don't you give him a period of time every day where he actually gets to play in the gym or work out? And, there's lots of different types of physical activities. Teach him dancing. There's lots of things that he can do. And by the way, they don't even have to be contingent on this behavior. You could periodically program them into his day so that, every hour he gets 5 minutes of running outside. And that kind of thing might actually help calm him down.
Okay. She just wrote in she said, I do sit with him most of the day during instructional time on Zoom, as well as play games with him and homework and all assignments. He frequently asks for wiggle breaks, so I let him. I say, let's have a dance party or arm wrestle, jumping jacks, but I can't be with him 10 hours a day. He does a little less movement when he's at home with his therapist because they mark it on their iPad. We also have a trampoline and we jump on it a few times a day in our backyard. I just want to acknowledge what a great job Mom is doing.
I just the same. Yeah. Wonderful. Good for you. That's perfect what you're doing. So then the rest of the time, don't feel bad about blocking it. Because if he's getting plenty of opportunities, again, this goes back to discrimination. It's important for our kids to discriminate when it's okay to do a certain thing and when it's not. And so by blocking him the rest of the time, like simply telling him, depending on his functioning level, making sure that he understands that he is not allowed inside to do these wiggling things, but he is allowed to do it when he's on a break, when he's having a dance party, or when he's on the trampoline. Those are the appropriate places and times for him to do all of the movements. The rest of the time, he needs to stay still. So that is something you'll have to help him discriminate. Now, I do want to also, because I'm not there and I can't see him, make sure that we're talking about self-stimulatory behaviors that he does have control over. Because sometimes I've had parents who will come to me and they consider something to be a self-stimulatory behavior, and actually it's a tic. And then we're looking at other types of things like Tourette's or tic disorders, and that's very, very different. So as long as he has control over it, then you should teach him how to discriminate.
Wonderful. And I'm so glad this other parent wrote in, because we didn't get to her question last week. My son is 5 years old, diagnosed with level 2 on the spectrum, global developmental delay, and language disorder. He is limited verbal. When he has meltdowns, is it okay to hold him and comfort him? My husband sends him to his room. I usually will take him and hold him without speaking. Meltdowns generally occur when he is denied something he wants.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's a really great question, and we are going to get into the functions of behavior yet again. So I love that the parent mentioned that he has a meltdown when he doesn't get something that he wants. So at this point, as you need to, the right way to deal with it is to make sure that he doesn't get the thing that he just tantrumed for under any circumstances. And ideally, you would want to just ignore the meltdown. Now, it's hard to ignore a meltdown when you tell the child to go to his room, when you hold him, especially when you hold him, you're giving him a lot of attention and love and caring, which I know as parents, we want to do that. But you don't really want to do that when he's having a meltdown, because honestly, it's when you're rewarding him for when he has a meltdown, you're not rewarding him with the object that he was tantruming for, but you are rewarding him nevertheless, because being held and so on is not necessarily negative to the child. So at this point, my recommendation would be to not hold him and not send him to his room. But if you can tolerate it, if you can both handle it, ignore him. Just let him have his meltdown, completely ignore him. And that is very hard to do, believe me, I know. And I know, Shannon, you've had experience with this as well. But if you can ignore him, what to expect is that the meltdown might get a little bit more intense, but then if you stick with it, it will go away. And he will learn that having a meltdown is not a good way to communicate. Now, at the same time, what I want to advise you is, if there's a circumstance where he wants something, you know it ahead of time. You know that he's about to have a meltdown because he wants that object, or he wants to get out of a situation, whatever it is, and you prompt him to vocalize what he wants, right? So you prompt him to have the appropriate response. I think, Shannon, did the parents say that it happens when he wants access to something?
They said when he gets denied something, yes, but I don't know what it is he's denied. Yeah.
Right. So if you can just model for him before he tantrums, if you can tell him, say, I want whatever it is, and he says it, and you can give it to him. Wherever that is possible, then do that, okay, so that he avoids the tantrum and learns that he can vocalize to receive the object, wherever possible. Now, sometimes it's not possible to give him the object that he wants, in which case, if he tantrums, you need to completely ignore it. And again, this is another circumstance where you're teaching your child discrimination. It is okay to ask for something and then you will receive it. It is not okay to have a tantrum or a meltdown. In that case, you will not receive it. See, and it's always about teaching our kids when something is okay and when it's not.
I lost you there for just a second, but I just want to say, when we talk about ignoring, that I didn't understand when therapists were first talking to me about ignoring. But I've told the story many times before, so I'm not going to tell it again here, but it doesn't mean that you are someplace where you don't have eyes on the situation. When they did the first planned ignoring with me, I was in the room with my son, but where we have this thing where we orient to our kids. Your kid is freaking out and your kid is screaming and your kid is pulling on your pant leg. And we will turn to them and say, stop that. Don't do that. That's not ignoring. What they taught me was to busy myself with another activity so that I'm in the room with him. And there's the famous story that I tell about the fact that they made me water the plants and then dust the television and clean up some mail. And I was like, what is this, a cleaning program? Right. But it was to get my focus. I was still in the room with him. I was still making sure that he wasn't hurting himself or, property destruction, that I could, if I saw him walking over to take a planter and toss it across the room, I got there first and moved the planter. But I didn't say to him, I'm moving this so you can't throw it. I didn't make eye contact with him and say, ha, tricked you. I got here before you. All these things that I would have done. So, but what it does, what I think the explanation that was made for me, that it's like there's a light switch on me. And that when he is behaving in a way, that is appropriate and the way that we expect him to behave, the light switch is on and I'm focused on him. But when he is behaving in a way like screaming or yelling or, throwing things, or he would swipe things off of the counter, my light switch is off and I'm blocking, but I'm not giving him any of my light. My light switch is off. And that's super important to learn how to do. It does not mean you send them someplace else where you don't have eyes on them, or that you ignore everything that they say. Only if he's screaming, I'm, wiping my phone off, right? And then if he stops screaming and he says, Mom, what are you doing? I go, oh, I'm wiping my phone. And then if he starts screaming, I go back to wiping my phone and not paying attention to what he's doing. It's hard, y'all. It is hard. And be gentle with yourself if you don't get it right the first time, but it works. They learn so quickly. Oh, she's not giving me what I want for that, so I guess I'll try something.
Yeah, that was a great description, Shannon, and that's really important, because basically it's not at all about ignoring every behavior. We're not recommending that. You want to just ignore behaviors that are unacceptable to you, and you want to reward the behaviors that are appropriate. So any kind of conversation or request vocally, or anything that is appropriate, you do want to interact with and engage with, and anything that is not appropriate for you or is challenging in some way or inappropriate to the moment, those are the behaviors that you want to ignore.
Yeah, and it's super hard, you guys. It goes against everything that you ever saw anybody demonstrate in terms of parenting on a TV show or in a movie or anything, because and your in-laws are going to lose their minds when you do this. Like, they're going to go, you need to say something to him. You need to, like, he needs to be talked to. You can't just let that go. And in fact, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I have to get to this question, and I know we got a bunch of live ones, but somebody had written this in ahead of time. We have to get to it. My 3-year-old is having ABA for a year now. He tends to be very inattentive in a formal table chair session and tends to stim a lot, vocal and gazing. The BCBA has advised to put a hand on his mouth to irritate him and stop him stimming. Is this the right approach? It's been used for months now and it's not working, according to mom's viewpoint. They are of the opinion that he is a difficult child to work with. I am completely confused, is what the mom said. I talk all the time, Dr. Granpeesheh, on the show about the difference between quality ABA and bad ABA. This makes me break out into hives and I want to cry for this child. What do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't put a hand on him or any child for any reason. So I don't think that's an appropriate intervention. That is not what ABA would tell you to do. What you need to be doing is identifying why he is vocal stimming and why he is gazing. And I can tell you that each of those will have a different function. And once you've identified the function, you will then try to replace it with something that fulfills that function and is more appropriate. So you don't want to do that, basically. And, that's kind of where you go. I could recommend that if you would like to find out or investigate a little bit more what the function of those behaviors is, we developed a really cool test many years ago. It's called the CIFA, which is the CARDS Indirect Functional Analysis or Assessment. And you can find that, I believe, on our IBT or Skills website. Shannon, where's the CIFA?
The CIFA is on Skills.
Skills. And if you go on the skillsforautism.com website and you look for CIFA, CIA, it's a series of questions and you answer the questions and it will help you identify the function of each of those behaviors so that you can then, and it'll link you to ideas, a behavioral intervention plan for each of those behaviors.
And that takes me into my weekly announcement of what is free on CARD and on Skills and IBT. So everybody get out a pencil or a pen or your phone so that you can take down a number. I'm going to tell you what's free, and then I'm going to give you a number that you call to get free access to these trainings. This week for ABA parents, and this is directly from the folks at Skills Global IBT, for our ABA parents and guardians, we will continue to offer free IBT parent e-learning course, Parent Overcoming Challenging Behaviors. I just really want to recommend that everybody take advantage of this because it's such a great training. It's a video. You'll get free access to it. You can watch it. Your significant other can watch it. You can show it to your babysitter. You'll learn a lot and it will make things better. Parent Overcoming Challenging Behaviors. For teachers, they're continuing to offer their IBT Educator Learning Module, Educator Starting to Teach, and that's available to teachers at no charge. They are continuing to offer their RBT, which is Registered Behavior Technician 2.0 training, free for parent audience on a case-by-case basis. So if you're a really motivated caregiver and you want to learn what therapists learn, the beginnings of what they learn, there's an online course that they'll give it to you for free. It's like a $440 value, but they'll only give it on a case-by-case basis. You have to let them know that you're serious business about it because it is a 40-hour training and they don't want to give it to people who aren't going to use it. But in addition, they're continuing to offer a 10% discount on all skills products for anyone when they call the office. All you need to do is call the number I'm about to give you, say that you're an Autism Live viewer, say that Shannon sent you, ask for the friends and family discount, because that's what you are, friends and family. Ready? Here's the number, 877-975-4559. Traven, if there's any way to put that on the screen, that would be great. I'm going to say it 2 more times, 877-975-4559. 877-975-4559, and that will get you to Skills Global IBT. They have a whole bunch of things that are helpful and useful, and they're trying to offer you something free every week during COVID to help you to get through this difficult time, and we thank them for that. I am the hugest fan of Skills and IBT, so we appreciate that. Okay, I want to get back to the questions in the chat. Give me a second here. So my 10-year-old son constantly swears, and it's getting worse, swearing more, especially during transitions and high stress moments. He says they're just words and mean nothing, and that I swear it's okay. That I swear, so it's okay. So hard for me to ignore, but when others may hear him, they think it's a lack of parenting. He's very high functioning and does not yet know about his diagnosis.
Yeah, so if he's very high functioning, once again, this is an opportunity to teach discrimination. A lot of people swear in private or even in the company of very, very close friends, but not in public. And he is 10 years old, so he has a different set of rules, I guess, than you do. So I have a number of different suggestions. One is you need to stop swearing in front of him. So for the time being, I know that's hard. Shannon's like, oh my gosh. But just for the time being. And the second thing is there's a number of things you have to do. You can, first of all, if he's very high functioning, I think it would be important for him to see or realize, and it's up to you how you make him see this, that others disapprove of this. So in other words, other kids his age may not want to play with him, or other teachers might think poorly of him, or when others see him swearing, they will not like that. Now, you could set this, I don't know what his rewards are. Like, some kids are very interested in making other kids like them. Other kids don't really care about that. It depends on what's important to him. But there is a lesson that we do called Circle of Friends. And what you do is you basically will teach him that, it's okay if you swear in front of us. So it shows you levels of friendship, right? So it shows you family, like the smaller family unit, and then larger family, and then friends, and then acquaintances, and then so on and so forth. And you show him those concentric circles, and you give him a list of things that are okay to do or not to do for each group. So it might be okay for him to swear. It really depends on your rules, your family rules. If you think that it's okay for him to swear around you, then that'll be the only circle that it's allowed. Around other circles, it's not allowed. And this is kind of like you give him a list of other things that are allowed. But this is one of those situations where in order to teach him the discrimination, you have to reward or not reward a certain behavior, right? So if and the behavior you're trying to get rid of is swearing. So reward the absence of swearing. And what you will do that with time. So let's say right now, get a baseline and figure out how often he's swearing. Once every hour, once every 10 minutes, whatever it is, establish that on an average, and start to reward longer and longer periods. Just tell him. If he's very high functioning, say, this is amazing. You haven't said a bad word in 10 minutes. I'm so proud of you. This is fantastic. If it's, give him rewards, give him a chart perhaps that shows him he'll get another reward in 10 minutes. Give him a timer on his phone. Whatever visual you need to use to help him understand that the longer he cannot swear, he will get a significant reward. And it's got to be something that's meaningful to him. And make that visual so he knows it's coming for sure. And then, as I said, if there are any environments where you allow it, then obviously there he can get away with it. But in other circumstances, he needs not to swear, and you're going to reward the absence of swearing.
Yeah. And, I of course, I have my 2 cents here, but my 2 cents is very dysfunctional. And I'm just going to throw that out there first because, other people have hobbies. I swear. I know that, I hope that you guys don't realize this watching the show, because I can compartmentalize just exactly what Dr. Granpeesheh was saying, that most of the time I'm capable of, inhibiting. I used to teach at BYU. I was a college professor at BYU. I was not a Mormon, but I was teaching there and had to sign a morals clause. I couldn't even swear in my regular life then. I'm capable of turning it on and off. But when I have my moment and I talk, I swear like a Russian sailor. And I enjoy it. It is pleasurable to say words that have percussive sounds. So, and most people, when they have children, you like to swear, you keep swearing, and then your child mimics you and you go, oh, I better stop that, right? Well, that wasn't the case with my child, because my child stopped speaking. So, which made me mad, which made me swear all the more. So, and I wasn't inhibiting my response. And when we started ABA, my team had to come to me at one point and go, we have a little bit of a problem here. Because my child, he didn't have good enough diction so that people could understand what he was saying. But the more you were around him, the more they realized he is throwing some words down that are going to get him in trouble in school. That's fine. Yeah, well, the first full sentence he said had that on his own, completely unsolicited, had the F word in it. And I, of course, was like, woo, because I know for sure we didn't DTT that. That was, he picked that up, right? And I have a sense of humor about it. I have friends that are shocked because they have never seen me be in my swearing mode. But we put limits on it and said, we only swear when we're in the car and nobody else is there, or we swear when we are home and nobody else is there. But I got to tell you, my son is 17 years old. And I think, I hear him when he plays his video games with his friends, and it is a swear festival, and it is not just him. And I said to another parent, I'm so appalled and embarrassed. And that parent said, no, that's how they're working their yayas out. Our kids are not out, doing things that can get them arrested. On the spectrum of behaviors, they got to have some way of expressing themselves. We'll just keep shoring up. You only do it when you're with these friends. And he knows when I'm with this friend doesn't swear and his mom doesn't let him swear. So I don't swear. So I agree completely with Dr. Granpeesheh, and now you can all judge me, but I do love to drop, I get compared to Beverly Goldberg all the time. Do you ever watch the Goldbergs, Dr. Granpeesheh?
Yeah.
Yes. Every show, we laugh hysterically. Beverly Goldberg, they have to bleep her on the show, and they point at me and laugh. I know you all thought that I was such a good little nun, and now you know differently. Okay, the chat continues. Let me take a look at everything that you guys have been writing here. We do have somebody who's writing in a question and wants to know your opinion about if a person with a diagnosis should be able to be suspended from school. So in your professional opinion, should a child on the autism spectrum be subject to suspension given the fact that they have been deemed by a speech therapist medically to have a deficit for not being able to effectively communicate their wants and needs? And I think if Bonnie were here, Bonnie would say, Bonnie has talked about this, Bonnie Yates, special education attorney who's a regular on Mondays, there are very specific laws about this, right? But it depends on what the child did.
Yeah. And it depends on what was done to assist and support the child. Yeah. So, bottom line is, in terms of school, the school is responsible for your child's safety, but also for the safety of everyone else at school. So they are supposed to give your child enough support, both physically and with an aid and with an IEP in place and with a behavior intervention plan in place and with accommodations and modifications, so that your child doesn't end up doing something that is difficult, challenging, or dangerous to himself or to others. So bottom line, if the school did all of that right, and your child did something that could potentially be dangerous to others, then yes, I would say they have no other alternative but to suspend. However, in most cases, the school, unfortunately, either due to lack of knowledge or lack of resources, doesn't do everything that they're supposed to do to accommodate and support and help and guide and teach our kids. And so as a result, our kids tend to use challenging behaviors to communicate what they want instead of appropriate behaviors. And then they get into trouble and then they get suspended. And that is not okay. Because to begin with, the school didn't do what they were supposed to do to handle it and to teach your child. So it differs, right? It has to do with, did they actually do everything they could to support your child to begin with or not? And also, what was the behavior? Shannon said, it's one thing to, throw a pen. It's another thing to throw a chair. So it depends. And again, even if your child threw a chair, was it something that the school knew would happen? Did they give your child an aid for him to be able to stand right behind the child, help him? Did all those things occur? And usually the answer, unfortunately, is no. A lot of the antecedent control, the stuff that we should do ahead of the behavior, doesn't happen, and our children have meltdowns.
Yeah, I get really mad when we talk about suspensions, because I don't believe in the whole suspension policy anyway, because we know a lot of times I know, being an ex-classroom teacher, a lot of times kids will act out in class in order to be sent out of class.
Absolutely.
And when they get older, they act out more so that they can be sent out of school. If every time I act out, you send me home so I can sit and watch cartoons at home, I learn very quickly, I'll just do that, and then I get 10 days at home. So I have problems with all of that to begin with. But I will tell you, this mom is writing in and say they did not have behavior support, despite having 1 year prior, and then it went away, the return to the brick and mortar. So here's what I want.
Sorry, Shannon, but I want to say, oftentimes when something like that happens, we should realize that that is not the right setting for your child. Right. And we need to find a different setting where they can actually manage the behavior through antecedent control.
And they can't just repeatedly send him home. You need an IEP. Yeah, you probably need a lawyer, and I'm happy to talk with you offline about where you can find all of those things. I want to get to a couple of quick questions because they're asking again. Hi, Dr. Doreen. My 10-year-old son has been taking his thumbs and tucking them into his fists. Have you ever seen anything like this? What could be the reason that he does this?
No, I haven't seen that particular behavior. But I mean, as long as it's not interfering with other activities or behaviors, I would leave it alone for now, to be honest with you. It could just be a sensory stimulation or experience that he's having. It could be a safety type of thing. A lot of times our kids do things that make them feel less anxious. I haven't seen it. I wouldn't necessarily mess with it because it's not harmful to him in any other way, unless it is, in which case you should let us know.
Yeah. Okay. And I want to get to a question about toe walking that we had from last week too. This is a twin sister of someone who has a diagnosis. She does not. She's 5, has ADHD and global developmental delay and language disorder, but not enough autism symptoms to get a diagnosis. She walks on the balls of her feet probably 70% of the time. She's very sensitive to shoes and socks. They must be and feel perfect, or she will not wear. She walks this way barefoot, socks, or with shoes.
I would recommend that you see someone else for diagnosis. I think that would be kind of important to do because those did not sound like ADHD symptoms. I'd want to make sure that you get a second opinion on diagnosis first.
Okay. All right. And then let us know how that goes. We are just about out of time, but I want to take a second we had 2 questions that came in about food. One from a 26-year-old who identifies themselves as being on the spectrum and vegetarian, and all they eat is white food, and they just never learned how to eat regular food, and they're concerned. I know you have a lot to say about that, but I also want to encourage them to watch. We've had an adult on the spectrum who's a vegan who has a cookbook out. Her name is Anita Lesko. And I would look to see the interview that we did with Anita Lesko. I think that you're going to find some great answers there. And in addition to this, we also had a question about someone trying to get their 15-year-old son to try new foods. I know that the food thing is very much something that you're very knowledgeable on, Dr. Granpeesheh, and it's a passion of yours to talk about good nutrition for folks on the spectrum. You've got a minute and a half. Anything you want to say?
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of good cookbooks out there. My daughter is actually both gluten-free and vegan, so I know that there are really good cookbooks out there. But I'm wondering if in this case, the issue is not the food, but perhaps the color or texture, which a lot of times our kids become very selective based on color and texture, which I think is a very interesting thing that happens. And what you need to do is you need to shape the behavior and reward progressively more different foods. So you might, if it's color, for instance, you might alter the color very gradually and go from, let's say, white to beige to gray foods to then darker foods or green or whatever foods. If it's texture, what we do is we begin with very, very small amounts of something that you can chew and then gradually increase that or gradually decrease that, because there's some kids who like chewable foods and others who will never chew anything and they like mushy foods. So it's a shaping procedure, and like everything else in shaping, it's gradual reinforcement of slightly altered foods, so that you can eventually get to the points that you want.
Thank you. And I just want to say too, for the 26-year-old who is vegetarian, and they talk about how they can't bear to eat onions, that there's like a feeling in their mouth that they just don't, sometimes I have a very dear friend who has an allergy to onions and garlic. And when she eats them, she is not on the spectrum, but when she eats them, it starts with a tingling and then it burns. Yeah. And then if she eats a lot of it, her tongue swells. Yeah. So, don't discount that, if something physically doesn't feel well, there are people who have allergies.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, because I feel the same way, Shannon. I don't eat onions. I eat garlic, but I cannot eat onions because they actually make my stomach hurt. I get bloated from them. So I would say the same thing. If it's something that's not absolutely necessary, And if it's one item, leave it alone. I mean, there are kids who will not eat a whole array of things, in which case we have to be selective and try to teach them. But you can get allergy testing ahead of time to identify the things that they're allergic to.
There we go. We are so out of time, but Dr. Granpeesheh, I just adore you and I appreciate taking this time with you. And I learned so much, and it's so fun to be with all these folks. I know we didn't get to all the questions and comments, you guys. I hope you see that we're doing the best that we can, but we will continue on. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you from lots of different places this morning. I don't even know where all we're coming from you this morning, but thrilled to be here with you. I think at some point, Traven, we have to do a little clip by clip of my hair because I couldn't stand it anymore yesterday. I was looking like I'd stuck my finger in an electric socket. And so once again, I took out the clippers and it's not going well. It just isn't going well when I cut my hair. I used to say that was a sign of my mental health. If I've gone into the bathroom with a pair of scissors to cut my hair, you know I'm not in a good place. And now I've replaced them with a clipper, and you can't see, but I've shaved the back of my head. It's so much cooler, though. Can I just say? But I didn't do so well with the front. So there we are. My apologies for my hair. But if you've come here for my hair, your hope was probably to see crazy hair. So I guess I'm fulfilling the need, right? I think it was earlier this year, somebody was giving me a compliment and saying, in my class at college where I was studying to be, get my degree in psychology and become a BCBA, we study your jargons of the day, and we have to write little reports on them. And our favorite thing is to see how crazy your hair is on different days. And I was like, okay, well, there we have it. If that's what it takes, I don't know, I guess. But thrilled to be here with you this morning live. And we're live on many different platforms this morning, although I don't know, the internet is having some sort of a meltdown of some kind this morning. So we hope that we can stay live with you on all the places that we're live. Let's talk about where that is. We are live right now on YouTube, on there's so many I can't even think. So we're live on Twitter, Periscope. Thank you, Traven. I need the prompt. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, and our homepage, autism-live.com. We will be on all of those places live for the next hour, and then we will podcast to a lot more places, but still be available in all those places that we were live, right? But we podcast to iTunes, to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Ghana, Amazon Music, Audible, Deezer, and many, many more. We're saying good morning to Amanda and Laura. Thank you for being with us this morning. So we're on all of those places. We want to be available to the autism community in whatever way that they find convenient. And we feel that convenient, as much as we can, needs to be free of cost to the viewer. So that sort of dictates where we are. Good morning, Jacinda. And hi, Nita. So we try to be places that are free. If you're looking at this list and you're like, well, Shannon, you're not in this place and that's where I get my podcast, please let us know. And we will definitely check it out. Traven is so superior at this and doing such a bang up job. We really appreciate him. But I want to encourage you, we don't spend money on advertising. That's just not what we do. We've been on the air now for over 9 years, but we don't, that's not where we're throwing dollars. You know what I'm saying? There's no dollars to throw. So we encourage you to like us, to invite other people, do a watch party on Facebook, like us on Facebook, follow us, subscribe to us on YouTube, whatever way is convenient for you. But like, for instance, if you're listening to us on iTunes, please write a review for us. I can't even tell you the way the algorithm works. If you write a review, so many more people get to see it. Because it bumps us up on the list of podcasts. And so instead of being on page 10, maybe we're on page 2. And so it's easier for people who need to find us. So help us out. Do whatever you can. Tell a friend or share us, like us, help us to grassroots this, because that's really what we've been about for 9 years. And we've built quite a substantial audience, but you and I both know that there are people that need help out there that have not yet found us. So, okay, so thrilled that you guys are here. I see a comment from somebody we're going to address in just a second. But I want to remind you that you can write in, and people are writing in right now. It's easiest if you write in on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Periscope. But we do also have a chat that's available on our homepage, autism-live.com. And it's not as immediate right now as in this format as the other four. So thrilled that we have it, and you can leave comments there. I especially like that when you're leaving a question for Dr. Granpeesheh, because then before we start the week, I go there and I know that there are questions for her there. But otherwise, write into us live now. And if you're watching us recorded, I think it's a good place to do it on autism-live.com, because it archives them in a better way. So we got a big show for you this morning. And I just got to address this comment. Somebody just said, my son gave me a concussion on the 27th. And so we're going to get to jargon in just a second here, but I want to stop everything for just a second and address this, because, that's epic, right? There are certain things that happen that we go, oh, okay, well, that's hard or that's inconvenient. But when somebody gets hurt, we got to stop everything, right? And we got to reevaluate, and we got to get help, and we have to get support, right? So I'm lovingly putting my arms around this mom, because that had to have been a really hard day. I don't know if people who don't have special needs kids can even begin to understand how complex something like that is, because we love our children. We do not love being hit, and nobody likes to be injured. And I talk frequently on this show about how easy it is to get upside down as a parent. I know that sometimes it's hard for us to be forthcoming about when our children hurt us, because we've seen the look in people's eyes when they look at our children differently, and they look at them like they're monsters, and we don't want that. And sometimes we blame ourselves when we get hit. It's a very upside down thing. I want to encourage you, you've got to get help, and you got to get help today. I don't know which city you're in. I don't know which state you're in. I don't even know what country you're in, but there's got to be somebody. And if you want to message me privately, we can help you to work together to find what kind of resources are available for you and for your child. Because here's what I know. I don't think that our children have the capacity to want to hurt us. That doesn't mean that they can't. Right? And if somebody, all behavior is communication. And if something was going on to the point where he gave you a concussion, it tells me that he has a need to communicate something, and he doesn't know how to communicate it. And until we get that under control, someone's going to get hurt, and it might even be him. So, and we certainly can't afford to have you be hurt, right? It's never okay for people to be hurt. And there is help and there is support. It's dicey, right? Because if you go to the wrong person, we see what happens sometimes, right? And there's some very sad stories. But I see that you are writing that you are in New York. Okay, so I know that there's support services in New York. And I don't know if you have a caseworker. I don't know if you already have a network of people that you can go to. But if you don't, I want you to write to me offline, s.penrod@autism-live.com, so that we can help you to find some resources. Because when it gets to that point, we just got to stop everything. There's a whole lot of things that we want our kids to learn. But when we have something like this happen, we go, oh, there was the agenda. Stop. Just like I did with the show today. We had an agenda. We stopped. Okay. Okay. I see that you are contacting some people. But if you need to talk this through, let me know. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. And I want to commend you for speaking up, because I guarantee you there's somebody else that's listening today that needed to hear that too. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. And it's not your child's fault either. But we need to deal with the issue, right? Much love to you. Okay. Now, we did talk about the fact that on Thursdays, when we have time, we like to kind of start the show off with our little warm-up that we do, the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nonny are those experts talking about and why do they have to use this kind of language. I do want to say, before we get to this, I left out my little disclaimer that we have a lot of experts on the show. I'm not one of them. I'm not an expert in the field of autism, and I don't even want to pretend like I am. I am a parent, and I care so deeply about individuals on the autism spectrum. And this show is meant to help and support the autism community, which starts with individuals who are on the autism spectrum. And, I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, my son was diagnosed with ASD at the age of 2.5. And he's now about to be an adult and he's 17. And I know that sometimes parents are annoying to folks who are on the autism spectrum, because let's face it, there's a lot of things we don't get, which is why we do a show and we have guests and we have people come in and talk about things. But I don't want to deny that parents, we have such a love for our children and for the community in which they are going to be a part of. And that is part and parcel of why I do this show, because I think as a community, we have to acknowledge that the beating heart of our community are individuals who are on the autism spectrum, and we have to listen to them. And we have to support them in having their own voice to say what they need and what they want. I can't come from any other place about that. How could I? Because of course I want that for my son. But I know what it's like as a parent when your child doesn't have a voice early on, and maybe not ever, that we have to speak up for our kiddos and that we love these individuals with so much heart. So I always say that this show is for the whole autism community, that beating heart of folks on the spectrum and everyone who loves them. And sometimes that's a parent, and sometimes that's a teacher, and sometimes it's a grandparent, and sometimes it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a wife or a cousin or an uncle. But I want to be inclusive of all those people in this community and work towards one purpose, that we create a world in which individuals who are on the autism spectrum have the respect and dignity and support and rights, and the living rights, not just the talking about the rights, but the rights to do all the things that they want to do. So that's where I'm coming from, but I'm a parent, and I don't mean to make that sound like I'm a lowly parent, but it does mean that my credential only goes so far. I'm not trying to pretend to be an autism expert, not trying to pretend to be a BCBA. I'm just somebody who cares. So that's why I'm here. But having said that, I have hosted shows about autism for a long time, and I have an opinion. Everybody's so sick of my opinion, but I'm here and I'm still talking. And so if you have a question for me, that's fine. But I do want to give the disclaimer, not an expert. Okay, but let's talk about the jargon, because if you're not an expert and people start using the jargon and you're like, what? So it drives me crazy. Okay, so earlier in the week, our jargon was expressive language. And now, of course, it's twin. It's partner in crime, receptive language. And this is an oldie but a goodie that we revisit from time to time. So let's take a look at first we give you the actual definition. I attempt to make fun of it because that's who I am. And if I don't understand it, I want to make fun of it. And then we move on to a working definition, which hopefully will help you. I always say, my goal every day is, can I help somebody save 5 minutes and $5? Can I lift them up to feel like they can? And if I can do those things, then I feel like it was good that I showed up, right? So will knowing what this term means save you 5 minutes and $5? And I believe yes. So let's take a look. Receptive language. Our actual definition is the process of attending to communication, spoken or non-vocal, comprehending the communication, and being able to react appropriately within a specified time parameter, even when what is being conveyed contains multiple facets. Man, doesn't that sound like a whole bunch of fun? Sounds very rigid to me. So let's move on to our working definition of receptive language. It's the child or the individual's ability to understand what is being said to them. And let's remember that what is being said to you isn't always vocal, right? We talked about this the other day when we talked about expressive language, that, you know, a large percentage of communication is non-vocal. And I'm talking about in the neurotypical world. I'm talking about in any communication, right? There's a lot of communication that happens that is not vocal. I'm a former teacher. And, you know, sometimes if I gave an assignment to my class and everybody's working, but there's one student who isn't working, right? And if I were to speak to that student and say to them, you know, do your work or something like that, that could potentially be disruptive to the other students. So we perfect the eyebrow and the look, teacher look, where it's like, you know, and that is a form of, it's actually a form of verbal communication, but it's not vocal communication, right? But I don't know about you, some of us are stronger in this than others. And I always say, if we think about it, expressive is everything that goes that way. If I'm trying to express something to you and I say, stop, right? It's anything that goes that way, which could be my hand, but it's me. It's coming from me to you communication. Receptive is my ability to take it in. So if you say to me, stop, do I understand what stop means? If you just put out your hand, do I understand what that means? That also means stop, right? Most of us have one that's higher than the other. And I will let you guess which one is higher for me. My receptive is so much weaker than my expressive. I can't stand it when I'm driving my car into like a parking event where there's no clear defined lines, and they always have some person in an orange vest and they're like doing this and they're going like this. I can never understand what they're saying. I always have to roll down the window and go, do you want me to go that way? I don't understand. I've always said that I want to learn, special ops, they have that whole language and they go, you know, this and that. I always want to learn it, but I know that the whole world doesn't know it, right? But it's so frustrating to me. And I feel like they might as well be speaking Swahili. I don't understand. And a lot of times, I got to say, those people think they're being really clear and they're like this. Well, I don't know what that means. And I get very frustrated and the window goes down and everyone in the car goes, oh no, she's going to do. And I'm like, what are you saying? Because I can't get it through the hand gestures. Now, if somebody is very clear and they're doing this, then I know I'm supposed to go that direction. Sometimes I still want to clarify. But the clearer they are, the more. But think about, if you don't understand those kinds of signals, how much harder it is for you in a classroom, right? I was always very tuned in classrooms to the kids who didn't get these things because I understood it, right? A lot of times what we do, we can shore this up in kids. We can teach them how to learn these things, but we can also give them workarounds. One of the things that I was taught early as a child is to learn through example, to imitate. So the teacher might say, like, let's do this or whatever. And I wouldn't understand what it was, but I would look to the left and look to the right and go, oh, they're all opening up their books. So I guess she meant open up your books, right? And we can teach these things to our kids. It is very important that you have some ability to have receptive language. Otherwise, you won't understand what's happening. I will tell you, too, there's a whole area in here that sometime I want to devote a whole show to. It's just not talked about very much, but it's phonemic awareness. I know people, Traven, you got to remind me, we got to put this into jargon at some point. Phonemic awareness. It's your ability, like kids, they take kids for hearing tests all the time to test them to see, because they don't react. The teacher says, we're going to put on our shoes right now, right? And a bunch of kids go and put on their shoes, and the one kid doesn't, right? And sometimes it's that the processing speed is a little bit slow, so they're kind of playing it back in their head. And sometimes there's a phonemic awareness that needs to be strengthened because they can't hear diphthongs and triphthongs. So for instance, the word hour, it's two vowel sounds, a, u, before right? So This is phonemic awareness, being able to hear hour and code it to understand. And it's hard with hour because hour can be an hour on a clock, or it can be hour possessive. That's a lot to work through for a little brain. And some kiddos can't hear the distinctions between the diphthongs and the triphthongs. I got to tell you, we talk about skills on the show. Skills has a whole set of lessons to teach your kids phonemic awareness. It's sort of hidden in the academic curriculum. And I always say to people, if you're looking for gold, it's right there in the academic curriculum. And it doesn't get talked about much. Sometime I want to do a whole show about it. But if you have trouble distinguishing phonemes from each other, if they all sort of sound alike, you are going to have a problem with receptive language. I love Carly Fleischman, who very famous young woman on the autism spectrum, who did not show any signs of receptive language or expressive language. And, you know, by the time she was 13, her family had just resigned themselves to the fact that she was locked inside her body and that they would never be able to communicate with her. And then she took the computer from her care worker and typed, "My teeth hurt." They didn't even know she knew how to spell. That she showed no awareness of the letter A. And she typed, "Teeth hurt, please help," or something to that, akin to that. And now, you know, I mean, Google her when she interviews. She uses an assistive communication device. But Google her interview with Channing Tatum. Okay, she's a much better interview than I am. Compelling, amazing, right? But she talks about now the fact that everything was garbled sound. She couldn't decode it because her brain was hearing sounds and couldn't get them into chunks, and now she can. Okay. We've got a great guest who's going to be with us, and I see that we've got a question, and there's more about hitting. But I want to get to, don't go anywhere. I'm going to get back to you. I promise. But I want to make sure, because we have a guest who's amazing, who's here with us. So I want to finish up this, and then we will get there. Hello, tall dude. So in any case, receptive language, something that you can work on, something that can get stronger, even if it isn't your area of strength, but super important. And a lot of times in your IEP, when they test your child at school, they're going to talk to you about expressive and receptive language. It's important. It's not the whole game, but it's very, very, very important. Okay. And a lot of times when our kids don't have expressive language, people assume that there's no receptive, and often they are very wrong. Often our kids who are not able to be vocal are hearing things, taking it in, and receiving information. The first time that I knew for sure that my son was, we took him to, it was very uncharacteristic for us, but we went to SeaWorld on a little mini 2-day vacation. And it was really hard. And it just didn't seem like he was getting any of it. And we went to see the dolphin show, and I was so excited about the dolphin show. He loved fish. And he turned, the dolphin show was happening over here, and he turned to the side and was like, you know, playing with like a thread in his hand, and was not watching the dolphin show at all. And at one point they did a thing with the dolphins, and they asked the dolphins a question, and the dolphins did this to shake their heads no. And my son, again, turned to the side, and he's doing the same movement. And I said to my husband, is he mimicking the dolphins? And my husband was like, no, he's not even looking at the dolphins. Okay. And then, so this dolphin stopped doing it. My son stops doing it. 10 minutes later in the show, the dolphins do the thing again. I look at my son, he's doing the thing, not looking at the dolphins. He's sitting this way, and this is when we began to realize there was a visual problem, and that his peripheral vision was better than his dead-on vision, and that he was picking it up. That's receptive language. He's picking that up. There's stuff that were happening. He understood that the dolphins were responding, and he was imitating. Big moment. Okay, moving on. We always have a question of the day. Don't underestimate is the thing I want you to know. That, like, just because someone isn't saying something doesn't mean they don't have something to say and that they're not hearing. Okay. So here's our question of the day. Who would you love to talk to? If you watch this show, I think you can guess who I would say. I want to talk to Oprah. Oprah. I love me some Oprah. Oprah has been an inspiration to me forever on so many different platforms, and I would love to talk to Oprah. Now, if we're talking, we didn't put the codicil on this about living or dead. If we could talk to anyone living or dead, well, I certainly would want to talk to my parents. But if we're talking about people living, yes, I would like to talk to Oprah. Oprah, just letting you know. And I don't even know what I would talk about, but I would make a list and it would be fabulous. And I hope to meet Oprah at some point. I always say the person who introduces me to Oprah, that's it. Like that's going to be my favorite person aside from my son for the rest of my life. So who do you want to talk to? Who would you love to talk to? We have kidded before on the show on April Fool's Day that we were going to have Oprah on the show, and it was April Fool's Day, and people to this day go, it's so great that you interviewed Oprah. I did not interview Oprah. It was an April Fool's joke. I would love to say that I interviewed Oprah. Maybe we'll reach out to Oprah. I think we have before, but maybe we should do that again, Traven. That would be lovely. But who do you want to talk to? It's not all about me. Who do you want to talk to? You probably can. There was a time when who I really wanted to talk to was Temple Grandin, and now I consider Temple a friend. So who do you want to talk to? You probably can. Okay, moving on to our topic of the week. Our topic is using your voice. Your voice is so unique and so special, and you have a story to tell, and it's important that you use your voice to get what you need and to share your story. So we're talking about that this week. Now, our guest today, and I believe that she's already here with us, an amazing mom who is using her voice. She is a blogger and has a blog, Behind His Eyes. We are welcoming to the show for the very first time. Well, that's sort of true, sort of not. But Kirsten, and am I saying it right? Is it Kirsten?
Yes.
Okay, Kirsten Hunter is here with us. Like an ear. Okay, fabulous. Yeah. So thrilled to have you here with us, and it's so nice to meet you in person. So this is wonderful. So Kirsten, tell our viewers a little bit about you and why you decided to write a blog called Behind His Eyes.
Well, I needed an outlet for him. I don't feel like he was understood. So, sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, the part of using your voice is telling all parts of it. And if we aren't emotional about it, I don't know what we are. Right?
Oh yeah. I'm not 100% callous,
and when you say talking about him, I don't want to, who are we talking about?
Quentin.
And you tell what you want to tell.
Okay. So, Quentin is my son. He is wonderful, amazing, so high strung, and he just needs that that voice, that someone to speak for him. He's so smart and intellectual, and he taught me how to be a parent. Like, I felt like I was just this wonderful parent, because my firstborn is neurotypical. Mm-hmm. And then here's Quentin, here's your curveball. And it just, he just makes you want to be better. Like, when you're around him, like, you're just 100% focused on him, not just because safety reasons or whatever, but because he's just so entertaining, and he's very affectionate, and that's something that didn't happen for a long time. So hugs and kisses and, cuddling, and he used to be very sensory overload. So life had to that. So he was quiet space, tents, loads of paint and Play-Doh and, like my house is a kindergarten classroom pretty much. So his whole, the whole blog is really just about adapting your life to them, because I feel like society is 100%, they need to adapt to us, like
there's a lot of that
it's not
attitude,
fair
right?
because, and I see it a lot more with adults who are on the spectrum. So I want to be prepared for that. I don't want, and my son is not going to be, left to the side because, hey, you're 18, good job, like you made it. Like, no, like this is going to continue. So I want this to be like his life for him. It's all through his eyes, because he can't tell me anything. But when I look at him, he says so much, he's one-worded now, 1 to 2 worded, mimic scripts, echolalia, all
Right.
that, and
Oh, that's a good sign.
And I accept it and I love it. And I'm like, keep going. And like, we're praised like nonstop every day. I think you talked about it yesterday, like going against your better instincts, like why, praising not mediocre, but like simple milestones, like patting your hands dry. Like, who thought that, that would be such an amazing accomplishment? But it's like, well, yeah, he figured out, okay, after I wash my hands, now I got to dry it, right?
Yeah.
Like my hands can't be wet. That took months for him to be like, okay, I can pat my hands dry now. Or now he's getting dressed on his own, which is like crazy to even think of. But I mean, good ABA,
Yeah.
You get that good ABA and you stay with it. And I think having the blog also helps mapping out me as a parent, being able to structure myself for him, because it's my job now. So it's not just put a little Post-it note, here. It's like I have a command board, and, now I have the blog, which, being able to share with the outside world is nice, because considering COVID has kept us really isolated.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about COVID, because I know, one of your missions is maintaining and figuring out the way to do this during COVID. It's something that you write about. It's something I think you're amazing what you've been able to do, but it's not easy, right?
No.
For people that are watching, what do you think, you said like writing the blog, but what do you think else has helped you to get to this progress and to maintain during COVID? How are you keeping the wheels on, Kirsten?
Primarily, it's really getting the school involved and speaking up. They're amazing, super hands-on. If they could be more, but they can't do, due to restrictions. Research, like I found your guy, Autism Live during COVID, and it was like, oh, I have a question. I can ask this question, like I don't have to wait next week to hear from the BT, or it's like, we have an issue now, like, let's just ask it now. So it's about speaking up, like my mom says, answer a question with the question. So there's always going to be a follow-up, and having realistic expectations for him. I know he's not going to sit for even an hour at a time in front of the screen for school. That's completely unrealistic. Attempting it though, and trying it and saying you tried it, and then saying it doesn't work, and then having to find another method. I mean, it's trial and error. I set up a classroom for him thinking this would be great. He would like it. He hates it. he's like, this is school. Now I see this table and I don't, okay, let's take the whiteboard away. Let's, I asked the school for a chair. They gave me a chair. I have a school desk, no. So now we're going to do it on the bed. Okay, we'll go on the bed or we'll set up the big tent and we'll go do it in the tent. And, I had to just realize, like, don't get upset. They understand. They're not going to hold it against you that he's not going to want to listen to story time. Like, he's going to want to wander off. And in the class, he might want to wander off. And then someone might follow him, as long as he's still listening to the story. So it's mimicking the same structure that they would in school when it comes to behavior, but I don't think when it comes to the actual environment, that doesn't work.
You're making it
for
work.
Quentin.
Yeah, you're making it work. You're meeting him where he is and making it work.
Yeah, and I set up like multiple workstations and realized to make my life easier, don't leave big stacks of paper out for him to cascade around the house,
Right.
Make sure you hide the markers if it's not coloring time, because.
But you're also the queen of sensory play. Talk to us a little bit about what you guys do for sensory play, because this is an area that I think you're really good with. What do you do for sensory play?
Yeah, it's all day. Yeah, it's all day. So I really needed to just stop worrying about making a mess. And as long as it's structured, messes happen, it's whatever. But markers, coloring, loads of paint. He wanted to use the kitchen table as his art canvas instead of paper. Fine. Go ahead and do it. I need to cook dinner, and it's art. You're etching in the paint. It's creative. I'm not going to, stop your creative mind. He just got really into those chewer pens and the stretchy things for school and OT and stuff. And they provided that to me because he kept putting things in his mouth. So he likes to feel something. I tried gum, doesn't work. He just swallows it, He doesn't like fruit snacks. If we're outside, he would try to eat grass. So I have to follow him with bags of spinach. So he really likes spinach.
Okay.
So you got it. But these are things that the school taught that they said that they were doing, because every day I'd pick them up and say, how was our day? What did we do? I'm having this issue. What are we going to do? And so that, they're really accommodating and providing tools and stuff for him since he can't be there in person, which hopefully that will change. I've been reading a lot lately about that changing, so I'm excited. Yeah.
You're really so amazing, such an amazing mom and doing so much. I can't even imagine. I mean, I gotta say, I look at you and I didn't have my son until way later in life, and you're a young mom, and I just marvel sometimes about how a young person can get through this as a parent just on a regular day, but with COVID, I'm just impressed with how well you're juggling this and writing a blog that's a service to the entire community. Your writing is so honest and so open. So I gotta say kudos to you, and I'm so impressed.
You.
Where can people find the blog, and how often do you put a new blog out?
Okay, so I do have a website, www. You can go to behindhiseyes.com. I usually will do a post, like a official blog post on there once or twice a month. Something pretty lengthy, Facebook I've used a lot lately, especially for like pictures and videos and stuff like that, because I feel like there wasn't enough of that on there, and I wanted there to be more of like a faced and to see his progress, because I don't know if you've seen on there, but like when it comes to music, he's so vocal about it. I know he's going to be a musician. I know he's going to do
so handsome too. He's a cutie. Like
oh my God, he's a heartbreaker. I don't even know what to do with him now. Like, it's the first thing everyone says is, oh my God, he's so awesome. And then I know all these other moms can relate. He doesn't look autistic. So it's, and of course there is no look to it, and that just is our life. We didn't know. We had a little inkling, but then I saw him playing with kids more his age. He was always playing with kids older, but now he's playing with kids more his age. And then I was like, there's just a little something off. And if you have one little inkling, that's all you need. You don't feel ashamed. Don't feel embarrassed. There's a reason why there's resources. I mean, I went to Tri-County just because that was part of our insurance. And that's just, the direction that we were pointed in. And I really liked how they handled things and their outside resources, the Rainbow Connection. And then, and then I come across CARD and then you. So it's really just about putting yourself out there. You don't have to share everything. I don't share everything. There's moments that, we keep to ourselves. We don't videotape because we know that we're going to live with that, and we want that, for us. But I want everyone just to, and I open invitation for the autism community. Everyone needs to just speak up. Yes. Even if you work with someone, it's okay to say, hey, I just found this amazing resource. I found it helpful. Maybe you might find it helpful. It's a completely impersonal way to kind of, if you want to get that conversation started. And it's been, I've had that a lot recently with a couple of people. So, it's nice that you get that from, and you never know. You're like, oh, well, I'm glad I'm here to help, And
it is amazing. And I think that the work that you're doing is important. We want to encourage people to go look behind his eyes. So you have the website, but you also have a Facebook page. And in fact, you said, we don't share everything. And we're kind of, this is a little bit of a unveiling because I had to ask your permission to link you to the blog because you don't really name yourself on the blog. So we sort of have unveiled you here.
I think it's a subconscious, subconscious thing. Like, I didn't really make it about me. It's more like, when I have the time or when he, I guess, allows me to have the time. Right. Because they're so demanding, but what 5-year-old isn't?
That's true.
So.
And I just see you in everything that you do. I see you finding the opportunity to see the things to be grateful for and the joy. And I think that that's really hard for a lot of parents. A lot of parents are in the deficit. Well, my child isn't going to do what I thought they were going to do. My life isn't what I thought it was going to look like. They're in the deficit. And I don't know if you have any advice for parents about how did you find, because I see a difference in parents when they find, like you have found, how to see your child for who they are and love them for exactly who they are. You're still helping them make progress just like you would for any child, but you see who they are and you love them and you take joy in that. How did you find that, Kirsten?
I think you said it best. If it's not fun, then what are you doing? You have to have fun. I mean, what's the point in getting upset? It's not going to help you. It doesn't help them. They're energy absorbers. I mean, if I'm having a bad day and I didn't even sleep in the same room as him, right? Because he's sleep trained now. So, but he knows, he feels it. He's going to wake up in a horrible mood. And then if I just keep playing on that, then it's never going to stop. You have to, And what I think is a lot of people, I hear like the remorse because they're scared. And it's like, you have to understand the reason why you're scared is because there isn't enough people in the community that are open about it, even if it's ADHD or behavior issues. Because I think Dr. Doreen said that behavior and autism are for issues. So I think a lot of times all those kids who get expelled, punished, because they have behavior issues, it gets written off. It is obviously more than that, but a lot of people don't want to speak on about it. But there's a new generation coming. Everyone is so open, and I think it's just because of technology, to be honest. And I just want people to embrace the autism. It's not anything to be feared of. It's actually really fun. It's loud. It's messy, sometimes a little out of control. But they have to figure out how to feel the world. And it takes a while for that to happen. So when they're young, you just got to let them figure it out. And Quentin he screamed a lot. Let's just put it that way. There was no attempt for using words. He hit a lot, he was very physical. All he wanted to do was line up the boxes of food in his cars, and he would draw on walls. Once he figured it out, and we gave him different space, we gave him more outside, you have to literally change the world for them. It's not about them changing for you. And I think a lot of people forget that, because instinct is people should adapt to how we are, because that is what people do. But honestly, that's not really how it is.
Right.
So,
what I see is an amazing, sorry. We're having some audio issues, so I apologize for overlapping you. But we're running out of time here. But what I see is an amazing mom. What I see is an amazing woman who is showing up for the community, and showing up for her children. Sometime we'll have to have you come back and talk about the sibling thing, because that's a whole other Oprah. We just keep talking about Oprah today. That's a whole other. Love you some Oprah. Hey, and you know what else we have in common? You posted something the other day, and I was like, "Oh, girl," when you were talking about the magic eraser. Wasn't it you that posted something about loving a magic eraser?
Oh my God!
Is it?
Yeah.
Like I don't think I had seen the commercials for Magic Eraser, and I was like, whatever. And I think it was 4 years ago that I got my first Magic Eraser, and I wanted to do 7 shows on it, because I was like, okay, do you people understand how good Magic Eraser is? It's pretty amazing. So I'm glad that we have that in common too, Kirsten. We can bond over the Magic Eraser. In any case, the blog,
and Shannon, you inspire me a lot, and I love how I'm not an expert. I just have an opinion. And I'm the same. I will never tell anyone I am licensed or, whatever. But, life makes you learn a lot,
That's right. That's right.
More than a test would. So, my goal though is to be a BT. So I, that'll be like the future goal. And so just having to commit that time to those courses that you talk about for skills.
Yeah, good. IBT. And when you're ready to be a BT, I know somebody who's hiring. So let me know. Yes.
Okay.
If anybody wants to be a BT, I know a company that's hiring. I'm talking about Card. Card is always hiring BTs. We want good people, and I know you would be great. So let me know. I'm happy to put in a good word for you. Yes. In any case, I just so admire you. And you said there's a new generation coming, and that always makes me happy. Because I think we're part of that new generation. And listen, I don't know what happened. It used to be I was one of the middle of the road. Now I'm one of the old dogs. I'm happy to retire and move over and let you get in there.
Hey, you know what? I'll jump on that bandwagon and help as much as I can, you know. But what I've been doing too is, if you want, and you know somebody who's in this new generation of BTs, go and put a feature on them on my Facebook. I just started doing this. I think it's important to get it out there to encourage people in the same age range to say, hey, why not? I mean, and there's a need. People need it. So,
yes. Oh my goodness. We need an army.
We do.
Well,
it takes a tribe, I say. It takes a tribe.
I like that. It takes that's the truth. Kirsten, thank you so much for all that you do. And we're so glad that we know you now. That's very exciting. And we're telling everybody, go to Behind His Eyes. It's behindhiseyes.com, or you can go and find them on Facebook and talk to Kirsten, because she is a light in this community. Thank you so much, Kirsten.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I want to make sure that we have a second here. I just love chatting with her, but I want to make sure we have a second, because I know there was at least one comment that I said that I wanted to get back to. Hi, my 6-year-old son, almost nonverbal, has been hitting his father and any other person except his mother and friends who tries to help him, or even when they say anything to him. His understanding has improved a lot, but the language has not developed to date. So please advise how to overcome his hitting. And again, I want to say to you, I am not an expert. I am not a BCBA, but I have taken the BCAT exam and passed it, the board certified autism technician, but I have not done all the other requirements besides taking the test. So I have to give that disclaimer. I think you want to be working with a BCBA on this. And I think you want to do that fairly quickly. I don't know if you already have ABA, and if you want to write into me now and let me know if you do have good ABA. If you don't, it's time to really start asking for it, because here's the thing, and I've heard Dr. Granpeesheh say this so many times. If we could, let's say that we took a video of what happened, and if we could put captions on it, what would we say? What would we think the child is trying to say? Because behavior is communication. If he were able to talk, instead of hitting, what would he say? And you're pretty clear here that he's only hurting specific people, dad, and anybody who tries to help him whenever they say anything to him. But he's not doing it to his mother, and he's not doing it to his friends. So it could be that he's saying, go away from me. I don't want to do this. Or I don't like the way you ask me to do this. Or I don't like your perfume. I don't like your aftershave lotion. Like, there's so many things that they could be saying, and we really got to look at that to try to figure out what is the communication here, because every behavior has a function. And it is at its base, it's communicating something. We always talk about the 4 usual suspects, right? That we all, including our kiddos on the spectrum, do when we do things over and over. Like, if it's a one-off, we can talk about something, but when we're doing something on a consistent basis, we're doing it for one of 4 reasons with an asterisk on the 5th, right? So we're doing it to get attention. We're doing it to get access to someone or something. We're doing it to get away from someone or something, or we're doing it because it feels good. Those are the 4 usual suspects. And by the way, it can be a blend. I can be doing it for attention and because it feels good, right? But it's some blend of those 4 things. Now, the 5th asterisk is like A-E-I-O-U and sometimes Y. The sometimes asterisk is that sometimes folks do things just for control. Because if you don't feel like you have control, I'm just going to be honest with you. This is why I shaved my head last night, because I have control over that. I can't fix the world, but I can shave my head if I want to. I'm a 58-year-old woman and no one can stop me. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. And everybody can have their feelings about it, but I have control. And think about how many things you do in a day just because, you know what, I can. And when you're a kiddo, this is really rough. Doesn't matter whether you're a neurotypical kiddo or a kiddo on the spectrum, this is really rough because a lot of your world in life, you don't have control over. A lot of it. And when you can't speak to say, hey, I don't like it. I mean, think about when our kids do start to speak, they don't have a filter, right? And sometimes kids will go, your breath is bad. The person who is leaning over them, teaching them, will go, oh, your breath, because the person does have bad breath and it's miserable for them. So if I can't say it and I want you to stop, boom. And if you go away, I achieved what I wanted, right? So we always want to talk about what is it that the person wants. So we go back to talking about the ABCs of behavior. There's always it's never random. There is no such thing as random behavior. And I know like there's something very freeing in saying that. And if you feel like you want to argue, you're like, no, I've looked at it. It's just random behavior. I want you to have somebody else look at it, right? Because sometimes we can't see what's right in front, but there is no random behavior. There's always the 3-term contingency, the A, B, C of behavior. Something happens, the behavior happens, and there's a consequence. Even when the consequence is that nothing changed. That's a consequence too, right? So there is always something happens, a behavior, and a consequence. For you, me, our kiddos on the spectrum, the mailman, everybody, right? A, B, C of behavior. And so when somebody is when somebody's doing anything that's difficult, we want to take an ABC chart. Do I have paper? Wait, I got to tear things out of a notebook. I've shown this before. We take a piece of paper. Doesn't have to be high tech, but you could do this on your phone too. But I'm just doing my origami project and I'm folding the paper into 3 columns. Now, it just takes that 2 seconds, right? And then we write across the top A, B, C. A is for antecedent, what happened before. B is for behavior. C is for consequence. So in the middle here, I want you to start keeping track of this. And every time you write an incident and you get to the end of that incident, you draw a line, we start the new one. So what is the behavior? Okay, he hit Dad. And if that's all it was, that's all you have to write. But if it's he hit him twice, he punched him in the head, describe it. Describe who he hit and how he hit them. And then I want you to think, because it'll be fresh in your mind, what happened as a result of that? Did Dad yell at him? Did Dad step back and go, what the heck? And walk away? Did you and Dad have an argument about what happened? What happened afterwards? Did he, when Dad walked away, did he then get to go back to coloring? Like, you can't be judgmental when you're writing the consequences, because we've all done consequences where later on you look at it and go, well, I don't think that was the best thing. You can't judge that. None of us are perfect. None of us came out of the womb being behavior experts. So, everybody forgive everybody, but be honest about the consequence, right? And once you've got that written in, then you go back and you be a detective. Okay, so what did happen right before? And write everything you can remember. Dad said, okay, buddy, it's time for us to do schoolwork. Well, that means putting on a demand, right? Or did Mom leave the room and he hit Dad? Like, what happened right before? You will start to see a pattern, and it will start to reveal you'll start to have an idea of, okay, was he doing that for attention? And you might notice that at 2:00 he did it for attention, but at 4:00 he did it to get access to Mom. That's pretty normal too. So, but you will start to see patterns, but think about it that way. Which one of the 4 usual suspects was he going for? Attention, access to someone or something, to get away from someone or something, or did he do it because it felt good? Now, here's the problem with hitting, is that it might start out as escape, but what we see in people is that when you hit somebody, sometimes it turns into something that just feels good. I mean, why do people box, right? Because there is something physically about your fist meeting something that takes some of the pressure off. So you got to be careful. You can't let hitting just run rampant, because you will see that it starts to be maintained by other functions. And once we know what the function is, and if you want to, take your ABC data and see if you can take it to your BCBA and say, make heads or tails of this. And by the way, you'll save yourself a whole bunch of time and energy if you've got your ABC data on that sheet. That's what it is. It's called ABC data, to your behaviorist and go, so if we kept a log, they'll be like, what? This is great. I can already start to look, and it'll save a whole lot of time and energy and money to do that. If you really don't have access to a BCBA, we're out of time. I really want you to go on Skills you can get a 10% off if you say that you watch the show, but go on Skills, skillsforautism.com. They have something called the CIFA, C-I-F-A. It's the Card Indirect Functional Assessment. And basically you answer a bunch of questions about a behavior, and it would be better if you had your ABC data before you tried to do it. It'll be really clear. You'll answer the questions, and then it gives you, it's like the fortune teller, right? You put the quarter in, it goes ding, and it says, it looks like, based on what you've told us, that the function of this behavior is attention, and here are the ways we deal with attention. And basically, if somebody's doing it for attention, there's an antecedent modification that we do, and then there's a consequence strategy, and we try to block it so that they don't get the reinforcer, and we for sure don't give attention to it. But if it's something else, we might give attention to it. So if your kids enjoy hitting, why not take them to a boxing gym? That's what somebody else asked. I mean, that's a possibility, but I would be very wary of doing that before you have the hitting stop at home. We really, yes. I mean, I do think especially for our teenage boys, and as I say that, I'm like, I'll bet it would be good for our teenage girls too, to have something like drumming or hitting something to get the aggression out. But we have to make sure that right now he's hitting for a reason, and we have to teach a better way. So we don't want to just take him to a boxing gym and go, here, we have to teach him how to say, either with a device or with sign language or with a look or a point or words, I want a break right now. Or, dad's breath smells. Can I have somebody else? Right? I don't know what the issue is for him, but he's trying to tell you something. And especially that it's only happening with certain people. And it sounds like it's when people put demands on him. So anyway, I'm so sorry. I'm so discombobulated today, and I'm late for a meeting already, but I love you all. We're back tomorrow. You asked us a couple of weeks ago when we had Leah Hirschfeld on, you said we want research about genetics and autism. Tomorrow, she's presenting what she's found. She's gone and gotten us a bunch of research, and she's going to be with Nancy and I to talk about that. Plus, we've got a bunch of in the news and more to talk about. I adore you all. I'm sorry I'm so rushed getting off and we didn't get to all the comments, but the hitting stuff is really important. Good morning.
Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning, and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Shannon Penrod.
And I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And we're saying hello and good morning already this morning to Michelle and Renee and Elvira and Cecilia. Good morning, you guys. So thrilled that you guys are with us this morning. Nancy and I've got a big show planned for you today, but I want to start by asking Nancy how she is.
I'm doing okay. I'm frustrated because my computer's not working, so I'm on my mobile phone.
And I just want to say too that we have this new platform that we're putting out the show on, and we mostly like it. It allows us to see your comments in real time in much faster ways. We like that interaction more, but we're still working out some kinks. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, it does not like Nancy's computer.
Right.
But Nancy got it all updated this week. We thought we were good. And yet here we are this morning. We came early to fuss with it, and it still would not do it. But Nancy's a trooper. She's got her phone out.
Right. We'll see if I can talk with a three-way conversation when we have Leah on later.
Yes.
If
but
I can't, I'll have to sign off, and we'll try to figure this out.
Yeah. But Traven's going to let us know, because our plan was that we were going to start. Okay, great. Leah is here. Leah Hirschfeld is joining us this morning. We're going to get to our In the News a little bit later on, but we have Leah, and Leah is part of a team at CARD, and you can go ahead and welcome her in whenever, Traven, so that we can see if, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you all?
We're great.
Good. How are you, Lee?
I'm good. I know that, Nancy, you're having problems with the platform, but I kind of dig it. It's cool.
I'm glad you got it.
And you can hear her, Nancy. So that's a step in the right direction. I love this piece of artwork that's behind your head.
I know. What is that?
Okay. So I'm actually at my parents' house. We you guys know I'm usually based in Oakland, California, but there were terrible fires, so we said no thank you and left to go to Chicago to my parents' house. And I actually hate the painting behind me, and I'll point it up in a second, and I'll explain why. My parents have had this painting for, I don't know, 2 decades, maybe 3 decades. And it has scared the bejesus out of me since I was a child. And I will show you why.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's beautiful when you don't see the rest of it. So there's this terrifying thing here, and this androgynous individual on top, which is fine. I love the individual on top, but this just scared me for and it's dark and terrifying. So but it's a chronic.
We're all horrified now.
Yeah, it's terrifying. But the frame is beautiful, so it makes me feel, when I do this, I feel like I'm in a fancy art museum, but just don't work up. So.
It's working for me. All right. Well, I'm sorry I brought it up. It's traumatizing. But we're thrilled that you're here. Just refresh our memory, because we had you here last month, and we had some viewers ask some specific questions that they would like to know about research. And you went on your merry way and do what you guys do over in research, and did some research on it. So remind everybody what your position is at CARD and why research is your thing and what they wanted you to research.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a research coordinator here at CARD. And what that means is I feel very privileged. I get to spend my day answering questions, like the parent who asked the question, and I'll say what it was in a little bit. I get to answer questions for our caregivers. I get to answer questions for our clinicians, so that we're providing the best therapeutic outcomes we can for our patients. It also means I get to look at some data. I get to run research studies, all again to really provide the best empirical evidence and support our patients and the caregivers. So on that note, I get to come on here every month and try my best at explaining different things. And a caregiver last month asked about, if I remember correctly, it was a mother who had 3 children all diagnosed with autism, and she had been told that her risk is not the right word, but the possibility of having a child with autism after having 1 child with autism went down, which is not accurate from everything that I have read and looked at. And actually, your likelihood goes up. If you have 1 child with autism, the likelihood you have a 2nd child with autism goes up, and then the likelihood that you have a 3rd child with autism, if you have 2 children with autism, goes up again. So with that, though, she was asking about genetics and the role of genetics in the diagnosis of autism, and kind of where we're at with genetics research. And we're at some cool places, and some still, we don't know the one gene that causes autism, but I will launch into, my spiel about genetics, and please feel free to ask questions. It was amazing to have a caregiver ask me this question, because I didn't have to rack my brain about, what caregivers want to hear. So if you are watching, or if you jump in later, please, please, please let us know if you have a question. I can come on next month and answer. Or I can always be reached at research@centerforautism.com. And I'm happy to kind of dig into more questions. On this spiel of genetics, I'm not going to be getting too deep into a specific gene or mutation. We won't dive deep into those scary terms. But if, for example, your child has a specific mutation, or you're concerned about a specific mutation, anything like that, throw it in the comments, throw me an email, throw Shannon an email, whatever. It'll get my way, and I can always dig more research into it for you. So with that, I'll give a caveat. Like I said, I'm a research coordinator. I'm not a geneticist. So I'm going to try my best here. And you might ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, because I just don't have that knowledge. but I am more than happy to go on my merry way and find more research and find an answer. So I'm going to try my best. And with that whole spiel already, I'll launch into this genetics conversation. And so, like I was saying, there isn't one gene that causes ASD. There's not one genetic mutation we can point to. There does seem to be a heritable genetic component, right? Like I said, there's a higher risk of a higher possibility of having a child with autism if you already have a child with autism. And we'll discuss a little bit more about that as I go further. But there's also, there's these autism is also caused by mutations, which are genetic mutations that are completely new to the family line. They were present for the first time in a family member. They weren't passed down by a parent, they weren't passed down by a sibling, aunt, uncle, anything like that. And they're just new mutations. And that happens a lot of the time as well. So like I said, there's no one brain region here, no one gene, no one cell type uniquely implicated. And there's a bunch of different causes that we're seeing. We're seeing this heritable component, and then we're also seeing these new mutations that are just being introduced into the family line. And so before I launch into everything, there's two different models that geneticists throw around about the cause for ASD. And one of them is this model that there is one highly penetrant mutation and someone's going to win the Nobel Prize one day and find that mutation, or a very few slight, handful of mutations that are sufficient to cause ASD. And that's this one major gene kind of idea, right? One day we'll just find that gene. And then there's another model. And this other model is that there's many inherited variants that contribute to ASD. Each has a small effect, and when you combine that with environmental factors, that results in the risk of developing the disease. And it's not that either of these models is definitively correct right now, and it's not that these are mutually exclusive. We might have that model that has that one gene, and someone might find that one gene and it it explains 20% of the cases. And then we might still also have this other model of these, all these contributing factors of ASD, these genetic risks, these environmental factors, all these things that then causes you to develop the disease. And that might explain 20%. And then another 20% might be these mutations that are brand new to the family. So none of these are mutually exclusive, but these are just both the ideas that are kind of floating around in the research, floating around in geneticists' head. And so what I'm going to go through now is I'm going to talk about the different neural components that we're seeing developing into symptoms that we see with autistic individuals, and those mutations that seem to be playing with those. And then I'm going to go into, your risk factors, and also why, as a caregiver, as an aunt, as an uncle, as a sibling of someone who has autism, why you might care about this whole spiel anyway, right? Because it's all really cool, but that's great. I'm not just here necessarily for a knowledge base, though I totally am as well, but also so you have some takeaways. So one of the things that you may have heard is that there are mutations in genes in autistic individuals that involve how our neurons communicate to each other, right? How these synapses are talking to each other. And when these synapses don't fire in the same way that neurotypical individuals do, we see the processing of neural information differently in an autistic individual, right? That might be why we see behavioral consequences, cognitive consequences, and whatnot. And with the synaptic dysfunction, with these synapses not talking to each other in the way that neurotypical individuals' synapses talk to each other, it's also seen in other disorders, such as epilepsy. And so that's part of the reason why this theory about why we see more diagnosis of epilepsy in individuals with autism is because of those genetic mutations that are causing synapses to communicate funky. And funky is the wrong word. I don't know what the right word is, because it's not like one's right and one's funky, one's not funky. But I'm going to use neurotypical and funky, and please excuse me if there's a better word and I'm just not familiar with it yet. But anyway, so that's why we hypothesize that we're seeing more individuals with epilepsy in the autistic community than in the general population. And one of the reasons why we compare things to the general population is that's the way researchers are like, hey, this is funky, this is weird. If we see something in the general population showing up 1-2%, then if it's the same in the autistic population, we're seeing it 1 or 2%, then that's probably not that's probably not where something's going wrong, where something's funky or whatnot. So that's why, when you compare to the general population, that's why you're always doing that in research. And that's why when I talk about this, epilepsy and things like that, it's compared to the general population. So that's one of the genetic mutations. It's one of the genetic mutations causes these synaptic dysfunctions, and there's a lot of genes there that might be interacting in that way that causes this synapses dysfunction. One of the other things that we see is that some of these mutations are causing, and I think this is a fairly common or well-known one, that there are just extra synapses in the brain, right? That these synapses aren't being taken away for whatever reason to make room for information and for connections, and that's one of those mutations are causing that inconsistency, that difference that we're seeing. And then there's also a lot going on in the brain, different parts in the brain. So they think that there might be a genetic component to the amygdala. Amygdala is a very cool thing. Its role is in modulating fear and also social behavior. And we're not really sure, I say we, I'm not a geneticist, but the genetic community is not really sure how this might be affecting autism, but they do think it is. And so what they're looking at is like how the amygdala develops over time, its role in anxiety, and one really recent study that came out this month, came out in September, we're in October, whoa, that came out in September, found that they looked at amygdala reactions, and during facial expressions in autistic individuals found a weak response from the amygdala while autistic individuals were looking at facial expressions. So again, I'm pointing all these things out to say we might want to know what genes are causing these mutations, and these are the results of those mutations. That, your neurons aren't talking to each other the right way, or the neurotypical way. Neuron pruning isn't happening the same way. The amygdala is doing some funky stuff and isn't doing the same reactions that we see in neurotypical individuals. And there's another cool part of the brain that is involved in motor and reward systems. And so that part of the brain we've identified is thought to be involved in the repetitive behavior and motor routine learning. You can see where this is going, right? So in mouse models, they saw a reduced ability to store and process information in this part of the brain, which could lead to difficulty in new motor patterns, disengaging from current ones. And, all of these genes are kind of affecting what's going on in your head. Okay, enough about how those genes are affecting. Great, that's all cool. So why are we caring about this? Well, if you have a child that already has autism, you have a higher risk of having a second child with autism. Autism Speaks had a study that found that the odds are 1 in 5, 20%. And if you already have 2 children that have autism, the possibility that you have a third child with autism, I saw range from 12% to 50%. And those are pretty high odds. And another study found that if you as a caregiver, as you as a parent, had an aunt or an uncle with autism, then you also had an increased risk of having a child with autism. And I mention all of this because the next point I'm going to share is like, that's so what? This is all cool. This is all really interesting. But why is this exciting? And I'll tell you, I didn't know about any of this until about 4 days ago. But one of the takeaways from this, I think, is that, understanding the genetic profile of your child may help in understanding what's going on in the brain and those deficits you're seeing. And I had no idea. So the CDC actually does recommend genetic testing for some children with some caveats. But also, and I was shocked. I was like, that's cool, but this is like sci-fi, right? No, so health insurance also potentially covers genetic counseling and genetic profiling for your child. And I'm not coming, each family needs to decide what they want to do and what's best for them. Some families would find it really helpful to understand, and some families would find it incredibly stressful. So whatever you as a caregiver, you as a family are interested in, and would make you feel better and make you feel more comfortable, you should do. But it's something to talk about that, genetic testing for your child might be interesting and might be more than interesting. It might help to understand the mutations and the causes that you're seeing. And, we study genetics, not just so we can say that's really cool, but so we can provide personalized or precision medicine for that individual. And this is all, I'm going to quote a bunch of studies that came out last month. Like, this is cool new stuff. And one study that was published last month by Arnett and her colleagues found that each genetic cause, so they looked at a bunch of different mutations, and that those mutations had different early developmental milestones that explained the overall functioning of that child later on. So if you, so if you do the genetic testing, you do genetic counseling, again, not a geneticist, not a genetic counselor, so I don't know what they'll tell you. But if you do all of that, and then, you say, okay, great, my kid has a mutation at the SNR gene. I don't know if that's a real gene, I just made it up. Then there may be studies out there that say, okay, great, that child is probably going to have cognitive issues. Let's focus on cognitive issues. That child might have development. Okay, and then, this study specifically was about milestones of age of walking, first word spoken, things like that. And they found that those correlated differently in the different groups of mutated genes, in the different individuals, different groups of mutated genes, to overall functioning. And so then we can say, okay, great, that child's going to have social communication deficits more so than X or Y or Z. So let's focus on that, right? So these genes, these genetic things, and what I was talking about, about how the brain's talking differently and whatnot, all of that might be able to help provide a better picture. And like I said, you may have a higher risk of having a child with autism if you're, as a parent, you have an aunt or an uncle or something. So if you do these genetic testings and you have other children, when they decide to family plan, they may have a better understanding of their risks of having a child, your grandchild, having a child of autism and things like that. And risk is not the right word here, and I keep forgetting. I don't want to use it. It's just an increased probability, right? So an increased probability of that. And again, if as a parent, if you have a sister who's going to be family planning, it may be interesting to them and useful to them to know about that genetic makeup of your child, because that genetic makeup could be those new mutations that are first time ever introduced into your family. And, or it could be, okay, you've got this risk and we know it's going to cause social communication deficits. Let's make sure we're paying attention to your niece, to your grandchild, to make sure that those social communication deficits aren't seen. Or if they are, bam, let's get them into therapy by year 1, year 2, whatever, right? Sooner the better for all of this. So that's my big takeaway, and it's so interesting. And I wish I could come on here and say we have the gene. We don't yet, but there's really cool and useful research going on about the different genes and how they interact. And as a caregiver, if you choose this route, like I said, it can be very stressful to know the genetic makeup and things like that. So obviously make the choice that makes the most sense for you and your family. But if you go down that route, you can always talk to your BCBA and say, we did the genetic profile. My child has the mutation here. What can you find out? And they can do research and see if there's more deficits in different areas or more strengths, right? Like, oh, this kid is great at X, right? Because of that genetic makeup. So very cool. And like I said, I had no idea your health insurance may cover this. So it's definitely worth, if it's interesting to you, definitely worth having a conversation with your primary care physician, your pediatrician, figuring out if you need a recommendation before you go to a genetic counselor or anything like that, figuring out how much and what your health insurance will cover. But it's a question, it's worth asking the question if you're interested in it. And it may be helpful and beneficial to not just you, but to your children as they family plan several years down the road, or however old your children are, or your siblings, right, as they family plan and things. So it's really interesting, and it's worth asking if you're interested about it.
Fascinating stuff. I have a couple of questions, and I'm sure that Nancy does too. This genetic testing has come a long way in the last couple of years, because a couple of years ago, we had one company on that was pretty cutting edge and doing things that other people weren't doing. And then since then, there have been a lot of other companies that it's much more mainstream than it was even 2 years ago to go and get your child genetic tested. I know when Jem was diagnosed, the very first thing that they asked us to do was to go across the hall and to give blood to have him tested for Fragile X.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only thing that we were made aware of. He got tested, of course, and did not have Fragile X. But we've been saying for years, and Nancy can attest to this too, that if you eat just that one alone, if you get your child tested and your child does have Fragile X, it directs their health care for the rest of their life for a whole bunch of things that you would want to be aware of. So for that reason alone, we've been telling people go and do genetic testing. I have not had Gem genetic tested. I keep saying I'm going to do it, but I haven't done it. And I just recently, in fact, I'm waiting for my results. I did the 23andMe genetic, the one that also does your medical as well. Because I want to know more about heritage and things of that nature, and I want to be connected if there are relatives that I don't know. But we also are interested to see things, I'm interested to see if I have the BRCA gene. There's all of those things. But Nancy, did you ever decide to have Wyatt tested?
No, I did not have Wyatt tested. And interestingly enough, he has had 2 seizures, and I don't know whether the testing would have shown epilepsy on his side or not.
In fairness to both of us, by the time the genetic testing came out, our kids were so much older that it was not as imperative. But I think if our kids were being diagnosed today, I think both of us would run out and do it. Don't you?
Yeah, I think I would if he was diagnosed today, for sure.
There we go. But my other question for you is, I know that on a regular basis, you guys take research that's out there and you write it up for the CARD community, for everybody to be aware, so that everybody isn't having to go out and constantly be looking at research. I'm wondering, are you going to write this up for the CARD community?
Actually, that Arnett and colleagues article I talked about that showed that there was developmental differences and milestones that different milestones that individuals with different mutations hit that then have later trajectory is written up for our October newsletter, and that will be sent out. And that also, that's where I take off the so what's and things. That is where we try to hit that home to clinicians as well. And always, if any clinicians are watching, or if you're a parent and you talk to your clinician, that October newsletter hasn't gone out yet. It will be sometime this month. But those BCBAs, anyone practicing is always welcome to send a note to the research team, again, research at centerforautism.com, or just look me up, Leah Hirschfeld. And always, you can throw in, I have a client who's been genetically tested. They have this mutation. What can you tell me? What's out there? Or, I'm really interested in the clinical implications of this. What can you tell me? And we try to tell everyone what those clinical implications are. But again, this genetic testing is in part so we can be really patient specific and provide everyone with the best care suited for themselves, because everyone is different. And that includes genes, right? So that's where, we can really provide a more in-depth analysis, or say, there's nothing out there yet, but we'll keep an eye out, right? Things like that. So yes, we are writing this up for the October newsletter.
Wonderful. And I have a follow-up to that question, but we have a viewer, and I don't know that you're going to have the answer for this, and you've said many times, I'm not a geneticist, nor do you do genetic testing, but somebody said, I had my son done all kinds of genetic testing and everything came back normal, but he also has a lot of first and second cousins that have autism too. And are we missing a test? And I do know that when we have had people on, they do a microarray test, and not all places test the same thing. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. If you want to make sure whoever that caregiver, if you're watching, like I said, reach out to research at centerforautism.com, or if you have Shannon's email, send her a note and she'll forward it over to me. Let me know what test you've done, and I'll take a look out there and see if I can find additional research or support for you. This is still very, I think they've been doing genetic testing for the last decade or 2 decades, but it's still new and upcoming. So it might be whatever is implicating or, affecting your child may not be something that is able to be tested for at the moment. But send me a note, send Shannon a note. Let me know what tests you've done if you're comfortable with that. And I will try to take a look and see what I can find for you.
And keep in mind, I don't know how long ago you had your child tested, but it seems like they're updating these. I remember, because we've been doing this show for 9 years now, and I remember the first show that we did, Nancy, where they said we've identified a gene that plays a role in autism, the very first one. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is exciting. And then it was maybe 3 months later that they found 3 more. And we were like, look at that. There's 4 genes that play a role in autism. And then by the next year, they had found 27 more. And that was years ago. I have no idea what the count is up to now. But just keep in mind that things will change over time. But my question, and the reason why I was asking about, are you going to write it up for CARD, is because some of you know that Dr. Dennis Dixon, who works at CARD, it's been his mission for a lot of years, and CARD's mission with him, to phenotype autism. And that CARD has really been at the cutting edge of this. And Dr. Dixon and his team, part of which you are a part of, have been able to identify 17 distinct types of autism based on behavioral clusters. But that you also were taking that and comparing that with what's the word? I always call it the poop word, but there's a better word for it. Biogenetic, bio something or other.
Markers?
Biomedical markers. So you guys took poo and urine and looked at what was in those and saw if there were clusters to identify different people, and then are trying to match them up to the phenotype. But I'm also wondering if Dr. Dixon has thought about now adding the genetic component to it. And I'd love for you to have a conversation with him about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can always throw it up to Karen, who's the head of research, and she can bring it up to Dennis as well. I wonder if there's regulations and rules about trying to find out people's genetic profiles. But it's a good question. We have so much data, and being able to, attach a phenotype to a genotype would be very, very informative. And I do think there's some research out there about it, but again, we have so much information there that being able to do that would be potentially very beneficial. Again, so that, if genetic testing becomes more prevalent, if you choose to get your child tested and you say, okay, great, this gene is implicated, we can say, great, this is the phenotype we expect them to present, and these are the behavioral implications that we can really target at an early age, right, and make sure that this is going on.
Well, and that is the whole point. I mean, I've been saying since we first did the show and started talking about phenotyping is that someday, instead of saying autism, there'll be a name for each type of autism. And I hope it's something, Tweedledee number 4, whatever it is. Because right now, when you say that your child has autism, I mean, Nancy and I both have wonderful sons that we love that are on the autism spectrum. And from day one, they had some symptoms that were the same, but some that are vastly different. And yet when we say autism to somebody, they think of the one person with autism that they know. Right. Drives us all bonkers. But beyond that, what I've already learned from CARD phenotyping autism is that there is one cluster of kids that has an eye tracking issue. And when they have the eye tracking issue, they don't catch a ball well. Mm-hmm. And in our case, we were on the ball catching thing and it wasn't going well. And I said, let's move off of it. Let's move on to the next thing. But then he had problems with handwriting. And then he had problems riding a bike. And then he had, this problem. And what CARD has been able to identify by looking at lots of different kids and looking at their behavioral progress is that in that cluster of kids that there is an eye tracking problem, and that if we spend longer on the ball catching, that the other skills we don't have to spend as long on. Like, how much would that have helped us on, day 300 when I said, forget the ball thing. So he's not going to be, a professional baseball player. Let's move on. I would have stayed longer.
And to that point, tying back into the genetic aspect of this, as you're talking about this motor issue that you saw, there is a part of the brain that's been identified for that motor function and that reward system, And the reward system seems to also deal with attention, which could implicate eye tracking. Like as you're talking about all that, it might not be surprising that eye tracking, attention, and motor is all connected because of this one part of the brain that they've identified. And wouldn't it be great if, you know, with a genetic test, I don't even know if this is capable, but not a geneticist, but
Right.
but you know, you do the genetic testing after a year, you know all this information, and then with that phenotype, you already know we need to focus on the ball throwing, and we're going to see deficits.
Exactly. And then we would get further faster. Absolutely. It's pretty cool. Nancy, did you have any questions? As usual, I'm over talking.
I think Leah's made it all very clear, very easy to understand.
Thank you guys so much.
Now, we did have somebody who asked the question, and again, I'm not expecting you to know the answer, but they were wanting to know, why do more boys get this than girls? Are we seeing that in genetic testing?
So, okay. So, you know, I did see it a few times when I was doing the research. You know, we're seeing that, oh God, so this is, I'm trying to like make all my thought processes work here. So we do see that, you know, boys are being diagnosed more. And there's this idea that there's a female protectiveness, that if you're a woman, that you know, you were born as a biological female, you have a protective mechanism there that is protecting against the autism deficits, the autism things that you're seeing. But I will preface all, and that might be why you're seeing more boys than girls. But I will preface all of that by, you know, there's a lot of research coming out, and I've come on a few times to talk about it. That kind of there seems to be that, you know, that there might be a misdiagnosis of women, of girls, and that they're being diagnosed later. So it might seem like, you know, boys are being diagnosed more frequently, and that if you're a boy, you have a higher risk of having autism. But I don't know if that's necessarily true, because, you know, we're seeing some results here that are saying there's a misdiagnosis, that you have to have much more severe autistic traits as a woman, and that you're being diagnosed much, much later in life. And so those, you know, those stats might not be reflecting that. And also, I mentioned one of these studies. It was the first study in September of 2020 that showed that if you had that first degree relative, so if you were a caregiver and you had a sibling, you know, a sibling that had, this is supposed to be a boy and a girl sibling, but it doesn't matter. If you had a sibling that had autism, you then had more likelihood of having a child with autism. And that article found that if it was an aunt and uncle on the maternal side or the paternal side, so if you were the mom with a sibling with autism or a dad with a sibling with autism, it didn't matter if you were the dad or the mom who had the sibling with autism. And I point that out because the researchers made the argument that might dispel this female protectiveness idea, because if it was protective, you would potentially see the mom having less likelihood of passing down any autistic genetic mutations or anything like that if it's coming off of her side versus the father, if being a female somehow is protective of that. And they didn't see that. So I'm hesitant to say exactly why we're seeing more boys than girls being diagnosed. There was nothing pinpointing a specific genetic thing there. It was like, this gene only affects men, like, you know, color blindness. Men have it more because they only need one X, and women have both X's, whatever. Anyway, there's nothing like that. So I'm more concerned that the reason we're seeing that is misdiagnosis or something like that. And the more research I've seen come out this year leads me more to suspect something like that. But that's not to say, you know, that there isn't a female protectiveness. There might be. It's just that we haven't found anything definitive there, I think.
And a parent wrote in and said, as the parent of a girl diagnosed with moderate to severe autism at 3 years old after a massive regression, and having worked in 3 different middle and elementary schools, I do not see a difference in behaviors based on gender. I see the differences based on the degree of damage the child may have and how responsive they may or may not be to the day-to-day with Asperger characteristics. I can see how boys and girls may behave different, but in my mind, gender differences rule, not diagnosis, my opinion. And thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's so important that people, as you said, choose how informed that they want to be on this. It's such a private thing. Nancy, have you done any of the 23andMe yourself, or is anybody in your family?
I have not. Will you explain what that is, Shannon, for our viewers that don't know?
Well, there are lots of companies that do this, but 23andMe is a pretty mainstream company. And basically it's, your basic genetic testing, although now they've added the medical component to it.
Right.
So you can pay just for the genetic component to see like where, what your genes say about what your background is, like where your ancestors came from. In my childhood, I was always told that I was Irish, and my first name is based on the last name of the family member, which is Shannon, right? Which is very Irish. And so everything, my favorite color was green, and I was, raised to, we had the local Italian American company that, trying to think, it's sort of like, I'm trying to think what an equivalent is, but like the Elks, right? And I played on their softball team, and everything was about being Irish. That was a part of my identity. And I started doing our genealogy and found out that, we were in Ireland for 7 seconds. I'm Scottish. and it was like a real wake-up call. It was like, nobody told me I was Scottish, right? Well, apparently you can get your blood tested and and I'm waiting to see, I might come back and be French. And it might change my entire outlook of things, right? Whatever. So that was of interest, right? But I had asked for it for my birthday, and my husband said, now that you can get the medical one too, let's take a look at that. So by doing this, I can find out if I'm positive for the BRCA gene, which is the gene for breast cancer. I have many aunts who have had breast cancer, and my mother had at least one breast cancer scare that led her to do a breast reduction. And maybe I need to know that. Now, it's really dicey because some people don't want to know that. I know that a few years ago, another member of my family went and got tested for a bunch of things, one that I particularly did not want to know, and came back and told everybody that they were positive for it. I think it's really dicey, and I think they got a lot of guff from me included that I said, hey, have you not heard that, like, you're supposed to ask, do you want to know what my results were? Because some people don't want to know, and some people do. And I think with autism, you got to decide for yourself, like, do I want to know? But we're telling you there might be some benefits from knowing. But if you don't want to know, that's your business, right?
Right. How expensive is that test, Shannon?
So to just find out like what your heritage is, I think it was like $79, but to do the medical one was $199.
Okay.
And you got to do this, you got to spit into a tube, and you got to ship that off, and then it takes like a month. I still don't have my results back. But I decided that I'm in a place that I wanted to know.
Right.
So, that's where and I'm more interested, I got to say, in the heritage side, but I decided that for personal reasons, that I'm at an age where I'd like to know if I find out that I'm positive for the BRCA gene, I think I'll change some of the things I'm doing. I don't know how much, but I think I'll change some of the things that I'm doing.
Right.
Years ago, I changed my diet because I realized that my aunts had gone through this and that I needed to be smart. And I did. I changed my diet substantially so that I would be less likely to. But back then, they didn't even know about the BRCA gene. So there we go. And you couldn't get tested for it. But now, as you said, a lot of times your health insurance company will pay for some of these genetic testing things. You can just go right to them. You don't have to go to a 23andMe. I kind of want to know if I'm Scottish or if I'm French. So I want. And by the way, I'm Scottish royalty. I hate to throw that up to people,
Are
but
you really?
I really am. I really am. I'm Scottish royalty. I can prove it on a piece of paper. I'm like 3 millionth in line for the crown in England. Even I'm related to the royal family in England. They don't know. They don't care. But I enjoy it. Someone says, how can you assess a child and be able to discover that he or she has autism spectrum disorder? That's a whole other thing, because right now we don't have definitive testing. There are ways that you can test that are growing with saliva to be able to diagnose, and they're getting much more. We've had them on the show clarify. But that you cannot get a diagnosis just from that. It can go in conjunction with a diagnosis from a developmental pediatrician or a licensed psychologist. You have to have someone that is trained and certified to be able to diagnose an autism spectrum disorder. Pediatricians, general pediatricians, do not diagnose for autism. They screen for autism and make a recommendation to go to the developmental pediatrician. And there are many tests for autism. I don't know whether you're asking specifically about a genetic test for autism, or if you're asking about tests when you go to see the developmental pediatrician. A lot of times they do the ADOS. The ADOS is sort of the standard that they use, but it's not the only one by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm just checking other questions. So any other questions for our fabulous, wonderful researcher that we have with us before we let Leah go?
Or anything you guys want to see next month, anything like that, throw it out there. It's super helpful to me. So.
Okay. They are asking specifically about a genetic test for autism. And the only one that I'm aware of that's available now for purchase is Clarify. We've had them on the show. If you want to go to our homepage and put in Clarify with an I, and you'll see, or you can just Google Clarify, but they are currently, you can through your doctor at your doctor's office do a genetic test for autism. You ask for Clarify, but you need to know that it has to go in companion with another diagnosis. It doesn't have the ability. It is a predictor only at this point. How about testing for adults? What is the process for getting tested for adults? There is no genetic test for adults right now. Even with Clarify, their results are not showing that they have the accuracy. I think over the age of 8, please don't quote me, but I think that it's over 8 that they don't currently, their research is not showing that they have any form of accuracy. So look at that. Traven just was able to put up the link to when we had them on the show. So there we are. But Leah, I just thank you so much. It's so great to have you on the show and talking about these topics. We'll keep our ear to the rail. I know when we did the genetic questions, somebody else had asked another question and you said you needed more time. Do you remember what that topic was?
Yeah, there was another question about gut and microbiomes. I'm going to say that word. I think that's right. And I'm absolutely happy to come on next month and work on gut microbiomes. If that seems like something y'all want to know about, absolutely.
Oh, we so want to know about that. I mean, and I'm not even being a little facetious. Don't we want to know about that,
yes,
Nancy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very common concern and question for parents.
And I'll tell you specifically, I mean, I remember a couple of years ago that there was a big announcement that Autism Speaks had a huge amount of money that they were putting into research on the gut. And it was in the millions. I don't know whether it was 2 million or 10 million, somewhere in the millions that they were going to do on gut research. And sometimes research comes out and they don't identify and go, hey, we were one of the grant recipients on that. But I'd love to know, what did that, cartload of money get us?
Yeah. I will preface, I don't know if there will be many satisfying answers that I'm going to come on here with. But I'm happy to, let everyone know where the state of the research is, try to find out where that money went, and see what I can find for gut and microbiome. Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't necessarily want to know where the money went. I want to know what's our takeaway for it. Like, did we spend, not we, but, did Autism Speak spend, for instance, $7 million? And what we found out is that kids shouldn't be eating, sugared cereals. Like, that's what I want to know.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
was it worth it? Did we get a big takeaway?
I think they did come out with a study that showed there was a correlation between the gut and the brain, but I don't know how specific they got with that.
Okay. Well, hopefully you'll be able to tell us that next month. I think we already have our date scheduled.
I think so.
Right?
Early November.
All right. Thank you. We so appreciate you.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks for having me on and for all the great questions, y'all. Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
All right. Have a
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And now Nancy and I are going to delve into some news real quick. And I know I apologize because you got computer issues, so you're on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to read. Somebody said, I was diagnosed in my late teens, but I did not find out until I was 30. I didn't accept it until 2017. It's been hard, and I'm just trying to get connected. And I just want to say, welcome here. And we hope that you'll find resources here that will be useful to you and to know. I would love it if you would look through our 9 years of videos, because we've had some fabulous guests who did not get diagnosed until later. And one person in particular, and his name is going to escape me, isn't that terrible? But a preacher who said to us he didn't discover that he was on the spectrum until he had kids, and he was having some difficulties in his job. He's a preacher, and he went and got diagnosed, and he said, so all the pieces just fell together, and he felt like he met himself for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Lamar. What is his last name? Lamar?
I don't remember his last name, but I know.
Traven, if you can help me with that, let me know. For the MAP test for kids at school, what accommodations can be made for kids with mild autism? My child I want to get to the news, but I don't want to leave our guests hanging with questions. It is not, I don't know why the rest of your question has not come in on my chat. There it is. Okay, for the MAP test for kids at school, what accommodations can be made for kids with mild autism? My child is in grade 3 in particular, does the test as if it was a race, and it's all fun and exciting, but not important. If he were asked to do it while other kids aren't, because he was absent and the others did it, he actually didn't want to do the test and just raced through to get it back to his peers. And I think if you're working with a good ABA team, they can help him to understand that some tests are about how fast you can do it, and some tests are about getting them all right. And it's just basically a rule-oriented thing, and then practicing it with him and saying, okay, this is a test. This is a multiplication test, and we want to see how many you can get right. And you give them a sheet with 50, and how many can you get right in the shortest amount of time, and show him the scores so that he can see, there were 5 he didn't answer right, and, show him what it looks like. And he's going to need to know this, because if we ever get back to doing the SATs, some tests, if you don't answer a question, it doesn't count against you, right? But I would tell you honestly, with distance learning right now, getting something like that, a teacher to help you with that, is going to be an uphill climb. I would do that with your home team. Absolutely. Okay, so our news stories.
Yeah.
You want to start with horrible?
Yeah. Let's start with horrible.
And end with good?
Yeah. We have the story out of Florida. Where in Florida was it, Shannon?
It was in Miami-Dade County. And
young boy.
You know me, I don't. What's that? I don't like to say names, because I just, I feel like that's not the important part of it. But there's a teacher in Florida who has gotten a 3-day suspension for her behavior with a young boy who was on the autism spectrum that was in her classroom, that somebody took a cell phone video of. And the teachers union went to bat for her and said that in this day and age of, being able to tamper with video, we don't know that this video isn't tampered with. And this is the teacher who has been teaching for 30 years with an impeccable record. And we think this video, it was taken out of context and it was tampered with. And I just want to be the first person to say barf. Barf on you, the teachers union. I'm a former teacher and I was a member of the teachers union, and God help and forgive you, because that is the wrong answer.
And if you search this story and you look at the video, it's very clear that there's no editing done in the video. The video very clearly shows this teacher going over and hitting this child and pushing him down in his desk.
And the teachers union could provide absolutely no evidence that the video had been tampered with.
Right.
And what this teacher ended up with was a 3-day suspension. Now, look, I am a former teacher and I know how hard it can be in the classroom. And I only did brief stints in special needs classrooms. It takes a special kind of person because they don't give them enough support and help. And that's the beginning and end of that conversation, right? But if you can't do it, you don't belong there. And this woman does not belong in a classroom. And I would stake my reputation on that. I don't know if this is an isolated incident, but the fact that the teachers union is protecting her on it makes me want to throw up.
It's outrageous.
So
the father in this case has expressed complete and utter dismay and has said this is why we've lost faith in the public school system.
And it's why we should lose faith in the public school system if the teachers union is going to protect that. Now, listen, I've had people who have said to me, well, what she did wasn't as bad as some of the videos I've seen. Excuse me. If that is our new normal, where we're going to say that there's a degree of how horrible and a monster you are, we're dead in the water.
Mm-hmm.
All you need to ask yourself is, you gave your child, whatever your child's capabilities are, to this individual to trust and to educate. And if they listen, if she had done that to my child, no. And if there's a person that was in the sound of my voice, within the sound of my voice, who could say, if they did that to my child, I'd be okay. I want to talk to you because you need some help. This was not okay. And no, she didn't drag him down the hallway and she didn't leave bruises on his face. It is not her job to put her hands on a child. Don't even get me started. And I know you agree too, Nancy. This is just 3-day suspension. What that does is that's like smack on the wrist.
A little slap on the wrist. It should have been much more than that. Unacceptable behavior.
I'll tell you what, she's going to do it again.
Yeah.
And when she does, I hope whoever it happens to sues that school 68 ways from Sunday. That's what I just unconscionable.
Right.
Okay. Our other devastating story that you had shared with me is about an amazing young man who has had a very specific bike that his dad gave him that allowed him to move freely about his world to the point where they called the bike Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And tell them what happened, Nancy. It's horrible.
The bike was stolen. Some reprehensible person stole this bicycle from this young man and effectively took away his freedom.
Yes.
There you see a picture of the bike, and he spoke very proudly about what this bike enabled him to do with his life and the access it opened up for him. And clearly this bike was designed for somebody with special needs. Yep. So I can't imagine the type of person that would steal a bike for a person with special needs.
And everybody in the community has come out and said, look, just give the bike back. And I looked last night and nobody has given the bike back. It just really makes you wonder about humanity that mm-hmm. somebody would steal that. So we're putting it out there. If anybody knows anything, or I hope somebody can figure out a way to get this young man a new bike, because this allowed him to move freely about the world.
Yeah.
So, there we go. But I want to end on a positive note.
Yeah.
This is hilarious to me because I don't know about you, but for me, 60 Minutes is a staple in our household. We watch 60 Minutes every single week. Usually we record it to watch it later on. It's always recorded because I never want to miss what's happening. And last week there was so much going on our DVR because my husband watches that whole Walking Dead nonsense that we were going through what we were going to record. And I said, I don't think 60 Minutes has started yet. I think it's reruns still. we don't need to tape it. So I didn't tape it. And then I got inundated with everybody like, did you see Anderson Cooper? And I was like, what? So fortunately, the internet allows you to watch it. But Anderson Cooper did a wonderful expose on adults on the spectrum and what it's like for them when they have a job and what the difficulties are to getting jobs. And Nancy, did you not love it? I loved it.
It was a great piece. The young people that Anderson selected to talk about jobs and autism were really terrific. And it was actually, while Anderson pointed out the need for employment for young people on the spectrum and how prevalent, I don't know what the exact number is, but the number of kids that are going to be out there as adults is such a high number. And it was part of the piece was very hopeful in that it profiled some businesses that are making a concentrated effort to hire young people on the spectrum.
And I found it interesting that I think he showed like 4 different companies, but in 3 of the instances, it was because a parent had a child on the spectrum and was looking ahead for their child, but that had led to this change in the way everybody looks at things. I loved that we had business people. I'm trying to think. Ernst & Young. He asked the CEO of Ernst & Young, and he said, "Are you doing this because it's the right thing to do, or social change?" And she said, "Okay, let's just stop for a second and let me just say we're doing it because it's really good for business."
Right.
And I sort of really loved that answer because she made the point that we've all been making for a long time, that if you match a person on the spectrum to the right job, they're going to be better at it than other people, and they're going to be a good employee. They're able to catch things that other people. She was saying that they've been able to save them millions of dollars because of the level of work that they can do on a regular basis. And of course, there was the one girl that they interviewed on the spectrum, and Anderson said, what you do, it's really repetitive. Doesn't it ever get boring? And she was like, boring? No, I love when it's repetitive. And that would drive me crazy. I wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
But she was saying it's better for me that it's repetitive. And I loved that 60 Minutes, which is an outlet that is so mainstream and that I think a lot of people listen to, was able to show that it's worthwhile to consider hiring our population. And hands down, my favorite part was that he showed that the interview process does not identify people on the spectrum unless you change it. That you could miss the fact that because the way interviews are set up, it's all the first few minutes, it's about the handshake and the eye contact and the responsiveness socially. And that's not going to show you who's on the spectrum that has the skill for the job. So they showed how one company has changed the interview process to something that's task-oriented, and then they pitted a person on the spectrum versus Anderson Cooper to see who would do better. And of course, Anderson, who's brilliant, failed horribly at the test.
Right.
So I just thought I'm a fan of Anderson Cooper's most of the time. Don't always agree with him, but I thought it was great that he covered this, and that I felt that he covered it really well. What did you think, Nancy?
I think he covered it really well, and I think the takeaway was that young people on the autism spectrum can be a tremendous asset to a business.
Yes, I felt like that was the takeaway too, and that they deserve the opportunity to do it.
Yeah. So overall, it was a very positive piece.
Yep. So check it out, you guys. 60 Minutes. It's available online. I know because I had to go find it there.
Right.
But we're so excited that we have the opportunity to share that with you guys today to end on a happy note. Unfortunately, we're wildly out of time, but Nancy and I are back next week. And
try and get this computer problem fixed.
We're going to get it worked out. And thank you, Diana. We're so glad that you're here with us. So next week, big set of shows, big guests that are going to be with us. I want to say that Mike Hipple is going to be with us next Thursday. like we've got big guests all week long, but I want to give a specific shout out that Mike Hipple is going to be with us. Mike has been with us as a viewer and a contributor for many, many, many years. October, I didn't know this, and I should have, is National AAC, Alternative and Augmentative Communication Month. And so Mike is going to be here with us. He communicates via his AAC device. And he's going to be talking with us about how important it is to make sure that the people in your life, if they don't have vocal communication, that they are given the opportunity to communicate through other means, because he was a long period of time he didn't have a means of communication, and it really opened his world up. So he's going to be with us on Thursday.
Great.
All right. Hey, Bonnie's back with us on Monday. If you guys have questions about your legal rights having to do with this distance learning mess, please feel free to write those questions into me right now. But we got to go. We're past time.
Right.
Nancy, I appreciate you so much. We'll be back on Monday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.